The story begins in the dim, crowded tenements of Brooklyn's Williamsburg, in the early years of the 20th century. The air smells of coal smoke and bread, laundry flutters from windows that never close. A baby named Benjamin Siegelbaum is born to Jewish immigrant parents, poor but proud, chasing a promise that America might offer them a better life than the one they left behind. In these narrow streets, under the glow of flickering lamps and the constant hum of factory whistles, the seeds of ambition are quietly sown. The neighborhood is alive with the sounds of many tongues, Yiddish, Italian, Polish, all stitched together by hardship. For a boy like Ben, every sound carries both comfort and challenge, the soft lull of home and the sharp edge of hunger. He grows up in a world where dreams must wrestle with necessity. The Siegelbaum family's small apartment feels like a cage, packed with voices and fatigue. His father works long hours as a tailor, hands cracked and eyes tired. His mother, always stern but loving, teaches him to stand tall and keep his dignity even when their pockets are empty. Yet young Ben feels something stirring inside him, a restless energy, a refusal to accept the life laid before him. He watches the older boys on the corners, slick-haired and laughing, their shoes polished even when their souls are not. They move with confidence, with money in their pockets, and for Ben, that swagger becomes a kind of gospel. Brooklyn at night has its own rhythm, half lullaby, half warning. Streetlights blink through the haze, trolleys rattle, and somewhere in the distance a siren wails. Ben walks those streets with a kind of hungry wonder, noticing the small details that others ignore, the shine of a coin dropped in the gutter, the whisper of a deal made in the dark, the way a man's tone changes when he talks about money. Even as a boy, he learns to listen. He learns that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it moves like smoke, slipping through cracks, unseen until it's too late. At school, he is clever but impatient. The teachers call him difficult, say he talks back too much, say his eyes are too bold. He doesn't care. The world of books and lessons feels small compared to the pulse of the streets outside. His friends talk of baseball and movies, but Ben listens to the older kids who boast about bootleg cigarettes and borrowed knives. In their words, he hears possibility. He wants to belong, but not to the world his parents came from, to another world entirely, one of control, money, and respect. He spends evenings watching the dockworkers unload crates along the East River. The docks smell of salt and sweat and the metallic tang of ambition. He sees men gamble on crates, shout over cards, and settle debts with fists. There is a rhythm to it all, and it pulls at him like music. He imagines himself as one of those men, sharp, fearless, unbending. He doesn't yet know the cost of such a dream, only that he's willing to pay it. Sometimes, in the quiet before dawn, he lies awake and listens to the city breathing. A train clatters by, a window slams, a baby cries down the hall. These sounds become the background score of his youth, steady, relentless, alive. His mind drifts toward a different kind of future, one not defined by waiting in lines or asking permission. He wants a life where he can choose, where he can command attention simply by walking into a room. The first spark of rebellion arrives early. A stolen apple, a fight behind a bakery, a few coins that disappear from a store counter. Harmless things at first, but each act lights something deeper inside him. The thrill is more than the crime, it's the feeling of control, the rush of doing something forbidden and getting away with it. He feels invisible and powerful, as though the rules that bind others do not apply to him. By his teenage years, Ben has learned the streets well. He knows which alleys are safe, which cops to avoid, which stores will look the other way if you smile right. He's quick with words, quicker with his temper. His friends start calling him Bugs for his unpredictable streak, half admiration, half warning. He laughs it off, pretending not to care, but deep down he likes it. The name fits. There's something wild in him, something that doesn't want to be tamed. The nights grow longer, and the city tougher. Prohibition looms on the horizon, though Ben doesn't yet grasp what it will mean for men like him. For now, He's just another restless boy chasing a thrill through Brooklyn's maze of lights and shadows. Yet something about him is different, his ambition burns hotter, his charm sharper. While others dream of steady jobs and quiet homes, Ben dreams of command. He imagines a life where no one looks down on him, where the name Siegel, soon to lose the "baum" for simplicity, means power, wealth, and fear. In those early days, before the blood and the headlines, before Las Vegas and the legend, Benjamin Siegel is still just a boy with a restless heart, staring out his window at a city that never sleeps. He doesn't know it yet, but the path he's chosen will make him one of the most famous, and infamous, gangsters America has ever known. The city outside hums softly, like a promise and a warning. The story of Bugsy Siegel has only just begun. The streets of the Lower East Side were alive with noise and motion, a constant blend of hope and chaos that shaped everyone who lived there. By the time Ben was in his mid-teens, the neighborhood had become his kingdom, a labyrinth of narrow streets, shouting vendors, and smoky backrooms where deals were made faster than prayers were answered. The air smelled of pickles, gasoline, and ambition. Immigrants hustled from sunrise to midnight, chasing dollars the city always promised but rarely delivered. For a boy like Ben Siegel, it was the perfect place to learn that survival wasn't about who was good, it was about who was willing. He was lean, quick, and handsome, with dark eyes that could charm or burn depending on his mood. His temper was infamous even then, short, sudden, and dangerous. Friends would later say he could go from laughing to murderous in a blink, and perhaps that volatility was what made him magnetic. People followed him because they were drawn to the heat he carried, like moths circling a flame that might destroy them. His closest companion was Meyer Lansky, a small, calculating boy with the calm of a chess player and the mind of a banker. They were opposites that balanced each other, Meyer's brains and Bugsy's fire. The two met in the neighborhood's backstreets, where older gangs prowled like wolves and kids learned early to choose sides. A fight had broken out over a stolen ball, fists flying, curses echoing against brick walls. When Ben jumped in, wild and fearless, it was Meyer who noticed him, not because of the punches he threw, but because of how he didn't flinch. Later, Meyer would say he saw something in Ben that most boys didn't have: nerve. That night, an unlikely friendship was born, one that would shape the future of organized crime in America. Together, they began running small hustles. At first it was petty extortion, charging pushcart vendors protection from trouble that, in truth, came only from them. They were just boys, but their confidence made them seem older. They learned quickly that fear could be more profitable than force. Ben handled the muscle, Meyer handled the money. And in that partnership, both found what they lacked alone. The Lower East Side became their playground and their classroom. They watched the older gangsters, men like Lucky Luciano, Frank Costello, and Arnold Rothstein, move through the shadows in fine suits, speaking softly while others obeyed. Those men didn't shout to get what they wanted, they whispered. Ben was fascinated by them. He wanted to be them. He studied their posture, their speech, their control. He realized that violence was just one kind of power, the raw kind, but true power was quieter, colder, more deliberate. Still, he couldn't help his temper. When someone crossed him, the rage came fast, like a match flaring in the dark. He didn't plan his anger, it simply erupted, sharp and unforgettable. That wild unpredictability earned him the nickname Bugsy. At first, he hated it. "Only my enemies call me that," he would snap. But over time, the name clung to him like a second skin. It captured the contradiction within him, charming and terrifying, beautiful and deadly. By the age of 17, Ben and Meyer had built their own little crew, the Bugs and Meyer Mob. They weren't just thugs, they were organized. They took lessons from the established gangs and refined them. If someone didn't pay up, they'd first get a warning, then a visit, and finally a lesson they wouldn't forget. But for all the threats, they weren't careless. They avoided unnecessary killings. Meyer believed that too much blood brought heat from the cops, and Ben, though quick-tempered, respected Meyer's logic. Together, they created something different, a criminal enterprise that ran more like a business than a street gang. As Prohibition approached, whispers spread through the city about a coming golden age for men like them. Alcohol would soon be illegal, and that meant profit, endless, intoxicating profit. The older mobsters began setting up networks for smuggling and bootlegging, and the younger crews looked for ways to join. For Ben and Meyer, it was an opportunity too big to ignore. They started by running small shipments across borough lines, bribing dockworkers and patrolmen. They learned the value of connections, the right handshake, the right dollar, the right secret shared in confidence. Money began to flow in. For the first time, Ben wore tailored clothes, slicked his hair back with pomade, and carried himself with the swagger of a man twice his age. But along with the money came danger. Rival gangs saw the Bugs and Meyer crew as a threat. Knives were drawn, guns flashed, and alleys became battlegrounds. Ben faced it all with the same calm fury, reckless but calculating, never hesitating when others froze. He developed a reputation for fearlessness, but beneath that bravado lay something deeper, the need to prove himself. Every fight, every risk was another step away from the poverty he'd been born into. The nights were long, filled with the clatter of dice, the smell of whiskey, and the hum of deals whispered through cigarette smoke. The city seemed alive just for them, pulsing with possibility. They weren't small-time hoods anymore, they were businessmen in the shadows, partners in ambition. Ben began to dream bigger. Bootlegging was good, but it wasn't enough. He wanted a name that echoed beyond the boroughs, something permanent. Meyer, ever the strategist, kept him grounded, reminding him that power built too fast was power easily lost. But Ben only half listened. His mind was already on the next move. Rumors of organized syndicates began to spread, groups that crossed city and ethnic lines, linking Italians, Jews, and Irish into a web of national influence. For a new generation of criminals, it was no longer about street corners. It was about systems, profit chains, hierarchies. Ben saw the future forming, and he wanted in. He wanted to stand beside the men who would reshape America's underworld. Yet, even in those ambitious moments, the boy from Williamsburg remained. Sometimes, when the night quieted, he'd find himself staring out over the East River, the water reflecting the scattered lights of Manhattan. He'd think about his parents, still living modestly, still believing their son might choose a better life. He felt the pull of guilt, but only for a heartbeat. The city had already claimed him. As the 1920s roared to life, Ben Siegel and Meyer Lansky moved from small-time extortionists to recognized figures in New York's criminal ecosystem. They rubbed shoulders with future legends, learned the rules of loyalty and silence, and built reputations that opened doors, and painted targets on their backs. Ben's charm made him welcome in rooms where other gangsters weren't invited, but his temper ensured those rooms never stayed calm for long. In the sleepless heart of New York, under flickering streetlights and jazz pouring from hidden speakeasies, Bugsy Siegel's legend began to take shape. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was ascending, fast, dangerous, unstoppable. The boy from the tenements had become something else entirely, a name people whispered with awe and fear. And in that whisper lay the beginning of both his rise and his ruin. The decade roared on, and New York became a city of shadows and champagne. Prohibition had transformed the skyline, not through buildings, but through power. Behind every locked barroom door and hidden speakeasy was a quiet revolution. The underworld was becoming an empire. Money flowed where law had withdrawn, and those willing to risk everything suddenly found themselves rich beyond imagination. For Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, this was the age he had been waiting for. The streets that once starved him now seemed to glisten with opportunity. Every crate of liquor was a ticket upward, every connection a key to a new kingdom. He and Meyer Lansky, still inseparable, quickly adapted to this new order. While others brawled over small territories, the two friends thought bigger. They began running liquor shipments with precision, organizing routes, contacts, and safe houses across the boroughs. They bribed dockworkers to look the other way, paid off customs men, and built a small army of drivers and muscle. It wasn't chaos, it was business. Bugsy handled enforcement, Meyer handled the books. In the underworld's emerging hierarchy, they were still young, but already known for being reliable, efficient, and dangerously smart. But with growth came enemies. Competition was ruthless, and every deal carried the risk of betrayal. Other gangs, Italian and Irish alike, sought to cut into their territory. Ben's reputation as Bugsy, the man with the short fuse and fast gun, became both armor and burden. Few dared cross him twice. The stories spread, how he once broke a man's jaw for speaking out of turn, how he chased another through the streets with a bat just to make a point. These tales, half true and half myth, made him infamous. Yet for all the violence, there was something magnetic about him. Even rivals admitted it, he had style, charisma, and a spark that made him unforgettable. By the late 1920s, the small-time operations had evolved into something far more organized. The underworld was maturing, forming its own structure. Arnold Rothstein, the elegant gambler, who had fixed the 1919 World Series, stood at its center, a mentor to the next generation of criminals. Bugsy and Meyer watched him closely, learning how to mix class with corruption, how to make crime look like business. Rothstein didn't shout or threaten. He dined at fine restaurants, spoke in soft tones, and moved money like a magician. To young Siegel, he was proof that a gangster could be more than muscle, he could be a gentleman of crime. When Rothstein was murdered in 1928, it sent ripples through the entire city. For Ben and Meyer, it was both a warning and an opportunity. The man who had quietly united New York's underworld was gone, and a new generation rushed to fill the vacuum. Among them were men whose names would later define an era: Charles, Lucky, Luciano, Frank Costello, Vito Genovese, and Dutch Schultz. Ben and Meyer began aligning with Luciano, the most forward-thinking of them all. Luciano saw what others didn't, that the future of organized crime lay in cooperation, not chaos. Italians, Jews, and Irish could all profit together if they stopped killing one another long enough to do business. Bugsy was the perfect soldier for this new vision. He was fearless, persuasive, and loyal to those he respected. He also had a gift for building bridges between different worlds. He could sit down with Italian bosses in one room and dance with Hollywood stars in another. Luciano valued that. It was through these alliances that Bugsy and Meyer found themselves part of something new, a national network of organized crime. The syndicate was being born, though no one called it that yet. Within this growing empire, enforcement was a constant need. Someone had to keep order, collect debts, silence traitors, and make examples. Out of that necessity emerged a secret group of killers for hire, men who operated in the shadows, bound by loyalty and silence. Bugsy Siegel was among the first to help organize them. Alongside Meyer and a ruthless enforcer named Louis Lepka Buckleter, they formed what would later be known as Murder Incorporated. It was not just a gang, it was a system. A deadly efficiency machine that handled the syndicate's dirty work. The killers worked on contract, their victims chosen by committee, their executions clean and professional. No random shootings, no reckless chaos. Everything was business. Bugsy's role wasn't simply as a triggerman, he helped structure the operation, recruit reliable men, and ensure that rules were followed. Ironically, he helped bring order to the world's most disordered profession. To outsiders, the phrase Murder Incorporated would one day sound sensational, but to those inside, it was simple necessity. When someone betrayed the organization, skimmed money, or drew too much attention, the solution was swift and final. Bugsy oversaw several such operations personally. He preferred speed, no long speeches, no hesitation. It wasn't cruelty that drove him, at least not entirely, it was principle. Betrayal, in his world, was worse than death. Yet behind this ruthlessness was a strange charm. He dressed impeccably, laughed easily, and moved through rooms like a film star. People liked him, even when they feared him. Women were drawn to his confidence, men admired his nerve. That contradiction defined him. He could be generous one moment and murderous the next. In the smoky backrooms of Brooklyn and the dim speakeasies of Manhattan, his legend grew, the handsome killer with a quick smile and quicker trigger. By the early 1930s, law enforcement began to catch up. The headlines were full of shootouts, raids, and arrests. Prohibition was nearing its end, and with it came a reckoning. Some gangs disintegrated, others evolved. Luciano's group, with Bugsy and Meyer among its architects, adapted quickly. They diversified: gambling, narcotics, labor racketeering. Crime was becoming an industry, and Ben Siegel was no longer just a street enforcer. He was a businessman in a brutal suit. Still, he couldn't entirely escape his nature. The nickname, Bugsy, though despised, followed him everywhere. Cops used it in their reports, journalists whispered it like a badge of legend. It symbolized his unpredictability, the violent edge that made him both dangerous and indispensable. Even Meyer, his lifelong friend, sometimes worried about his temper. "He's got a good heart," Meyer once said, "but it beats too fast." In the hidden clubs where jazz played and bootleg whiskey flowed, Bugsy's rise continued. He rubbed shoulders with entertainers, politicians, and mobsters alike. To him, it all felt seamless, the same dance, different partners. He began to see the bigger picture: cities could be controlled, not just streets. Empires could be built, not just gangs. That vision, once a flicker in the back of his mind, began to take shape. The violence, however, never stopped. It was the heartbeat of that world. Men disappeared overnight, bodies turned up in rivers. Bugsy understood the rhythm of it all, the give and take of power, the necessity of fear. But somewhere inside him, a new kind of hunger began to grow. He wanted more than money. He wanted refinement, respect, the illusion of legitimacy. The kid from the tenements dreamed now of mansions, tailored suits, and the kind of fame that outlives a man's crimes. As Prohibition ended in 1933, many in the underworld panicked, unsure of what came next. But Bugsy Siegel was already looking westward, where a new kind of opportunity was rising under the California sun. He didn't yet know it, but that move would change not only his life, but the face of America itself. The streets of New York had taught him everything: loyalty, violence, ambition, but the desert would test whether he could build an empire not from blood, but from vision. The era of speakeasies and bootlegging was closing. The world was shifting, and Bugsy Siegel, dangerous, brilliant, restless, was ready to shift with it. The streets that had birthed him could no longer contain him. The boy from Brooklyn was now a man of power, standing at the crossroads of history, about to trade the cold lights of New York for the burning horizon of the West. The next chapter of his story would begin under the palm trees, and end under the desert stars. The train that carried Benjamin Bugsy Siegel west in the mid-1930s cut through an America both weary and dreaming. The Great Depression still lingered, yet Los Angeles shimmered with sunlight and promise. For years, Bugsy had heard stories of the coast, a place where movie stars ruled instead of mobsters, where money was clean, and reputation sparkled brighter than the Pacific. New York had given him everything he knew: power, money, respect, but also scars and enemies. California felt like reinvention, and for a man like him, reinvention was survival. When he stepped off the train at Union Station, he looked every bit the celebrity he wanted to be mistaken for: tailored suit, polished shoes, hat tilted just so. To strangers, he could have been an actor or producer, not a man who once commanded hitmen on the East Coast. That was part of his brilliance, his ability to blend menace with elegance. Los Angeles wasn't ready for Bugsy Siegel, but it didn't take long before the city learned his name. Officially, he came to the West Coast as a businessman expanding ventures. Unofficially, he was there to organize the mob's interests in California: gambling, bookmaking, and the growing Hollywood extortion rackets. The syndicate trusted him to establish order among scattered local gangs who were causing more trouble than profit. But Siegel had another motive. He wasn't satisfied with being the muscle or the middleman. He wanted something bigger: legitimacy, glamour, permanence. He wanted to walk among kings, not just of crime, but of culture. Hollywood in the 1930s was a strange, intoxicating place, equal parts innocence and corruption. Beneath the glimmer of movie premieres and champagne parties lay a world just as ruthless as New York's underworld. Studio heads bribed police, silenced scandals, and wielded power through charm and intimidation. Bugsy recognized the same patterns he'd mastered in Brooklyn, only here, people fought with smiles instead of bullets. He fit right in. He began frequenting elite circles, often invited to lavish gatherings by producers, actors, and starlets. There was something magnetic about him, a mix of danger and sophistication that intrigued Hollywood's elite. He was polite, impeccably dressed, and always in control. Even those who suspected his criminal background couldn't resist his charisma. He had the aura of a man who lived by his own rules, and survived because of them. His closest celebrity acquaintances included actors like George Raft, who had played gangsters on screen and admired the real thing in Bugsy. Raft became one of his biggest supporters, introducing him to people who could open doors money alone couldn't. Soon Siegel was a familiar face at the Brown Derby and Ciro's, drinking alongside producers and stars who whispered his name like a dangerous secret. But while Bugsy courted the Hollywood crowd, he never forgot his mission. The West Coast was ripe for syndicate control. Illegal gambling houses flourished in the hills, horse racing and bookmaking operations were scattered across the state, and a network of floating casinos off the coast catered to the rich who wanted thrills beyond the law's reach. Bugsy saw opportunity in all of it. He started forging connections with local racketeers, smoothing conflicts through a mix of diplomacy and fear. When diplomacy failed, his old methods returned, quietly, efficiently. Those who challenged him often disappeared or backed down. His reputation traveled faster than he did. Soon, Los Angeles underworld figures like Jack Dragna and Mickey Cohen began to fall into line, recognizing that Bugsy had the blessing of powerful men back east. But California changed him in subtle ways. For the first time, Bugsy wasn't surrounded by the grime and noise of the city. Here, the sun was warm, the nights fragrant, and the people seemed to live in a dream. He moved into a Beverly Hills mansion, complete with marble floors, lush gardens, and a garage filled with imported cars. He began to host gatherings that blurred the line between mob meeting and high society soiree. Celebrities, politicians, and underworld figures mingled under the same chandeliers, sipping champagne while Bugsy played the perfect host. He had achieved what he always wanted, to be admired not just as a gangster, but as a man of refinement. His charm was effortless, his taste impeccable. He collected fine art, dined at the best restaurants, and carried himself with the casual confidence of someone who believed rules existed for other people. The Hollywood tabloid sometimes mentioned his name, usually as a mysterious businessman seen at exclusive events. For a while, he managed to live two lives, one in the light, one in the shadows. Yet beneath the glamour, the violence still pulsed. The floating casinos off the California coast, where guests drank, gambled, and danced beneath moonlight, became profitable but volatile enterprises. Bugsy had a share in several of them, ensuring that the money flowed both west and east. When the authorities tried to crack down, he pulled strings, bribed officials, or simply shifted operations elsewhere. The law was a game he had long since mastered. Still, there were moments when the facade slipped. His temper, the same spark that had earned him the name Bugsy, sometimes flared even in polite company. A slight insult, a joke taken the wrong way, and his eyes would darken, his voice turn cold. It was a reminder to everyone, beneath the fine suits and the charming smile was a man who'd built his reputation on blood. Those who saw it never forgot. Meyer Lansky, back in New York, watched his old friend's transformation with both admiration and unease. He respected Ben's ambition but feared his recklessness. The two men spoke often, discussing investments and expansion. Meyer was pragmatic, he preferred quiet power. Bugsy wanted glory. To him, the underworld was no longer enough, he wanted to build something that would outlast him. He wasn't content being a criminal in silk, he wanted to be remembered as a creator, a visionary. That ambition found its spark in a place few others saw potential, a stretch of barren desert in Nevada, where a few dusty casinos catered to weary travelers. While most laughed at the idea of gambling in the middle of nowhere, Bugsy saw something else. He saw space, freedom, and opportunity. A blank canvas waiting for light. As the 1930s faded into the 1940s, Bugsy Siegel stood at the intersection of two worlds. In Los Angeles, he was the elegant mobster who dined with movie stars. In the shadows, he was still the enforcer, the man the syndicate trusted to get things done. He had power, wealth, and recognition, but it wasn't enough. He needed something monumental, something that could turn the name, Bugsy Siegel, into legend. The seeds of that dream were already growing in his mind, a vision shimmering like heat over desert sand. He spoke of it to anyone who would listen, a resort unlike any other, a paradise for gamblers, dreamers, and stars. Most dismissed it as fantasy, but Ben's eyes burned with conviction. He could already see the neon lights piercing the night sky. Hollywood had given him luxury, but the desert would give him legacy. Beneath the calm glow of the California moon, he began to sketch his future in silence, a dream that would one day rise from the dust and define him forever. What began as another move for money was becoming something far more dangerous, an obsession. And obsessions, for men like Bugsy Siegel, always came with a price. Bugsy Siegel's obsession with style, luxury, and image was not merely vanity, it was a statement, a declaration that he had risen above the cramped tenements and the dusty streets of Brooklyn. Every suit he wore was meticulously tailored, the fabric chosen for both comfort and presence. Shirts of silk, shoes polished to a reflective shine, and ties knotted with precision became part of his armor. To Bugsy, appearance was more than clothing, it was power. The way a man presented himself announced who he was and what he demanded from the world. In the smoky backrooms of gambling dens or under the chandeliers of Hollywood lounges, a well-dressed man commanded attention before a word was spoken. This careful curation of image extended beyond attire. Bugsy's hair was always slicked back, his mustache trimmed with precision, his posture impeccable. He moved with a deliberate elegance that contrasted sharply with the violence he could unleash at a moment's notice. In public, he was a figure of charm and sophistication, in private, he could be terrifying. This duality became his signature. Friends and enemies alike learned to read his subtle cues, the lift of an eyebrow, the tightening of his jaw. Charm could disarm as effectively as a gun, and Bugsy wielded both with equal expertise. His pursuit of luxury was also about creating spaces that reflected his vision of power. In Los Angeles, his Beverly Hills home was more than a residence, it was a statement. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, manicured gardens, and imported furnishings spoke of wealth, taste, and influence. Bugsy filled his home with art and antiques, surrounding himself with the trappings of a world he had once only observed from the outside. Every gathering, whether a private dinner or a casual cocktail party, was an exercise in control. People left not only impressed but subtly intimidated, recognizing that they were in the presence of a man who understood both refinement and ruthlessness. Yet, beneath the glamour, the drive for luxury concealed a restless mind and an insatiable ambition. Bugsy's fascination with opulence was inseparable from his desire for permanence. Money alone was not enough. He wanted projects, legacies, and symbols of his success. It was this ambition that led him to envision ventures that others considered impossible, ideas that blurred the lines between crime, business, and showmanship. For Bugsy, the world of gambling was not merely about profit, it was about creating environments that captivated, impressed, and controlled people. Every casino, every hotel, every social event was a stage on which he performed, and he wanted the world watching. Financially, however, Bugsy's pursuit of grandeur came with risks. The lavish lifestyle required more than street profits, it demanded large, sometimes reckless investments. Tailored suits, imported cars, fine dining, and extravagant parties were visible signs of success, but they also signaled audacity and drew attention from both allies and rivals. Among syndicate members, some began to question whether his tastes were sustainable or if they masked carelessness with the books. Bugsy, ever defiant, saw these critiques as the envy of men unwilling to dream as big as he did. His philosophy was simple: the greater the risk, the greater the potential reward, and the more enduring the legacy. Beyond the material, Bugsy's fixation on luxury was a psychological armor. It separated him from the past he had escaped, the poverty, the cramped Brooklyn tenements, the constant struggle for survival. Each tailored suit and polished shoe was a declaration that he had rewritten his story. He was no longer the boy who ran the streets for nickels or stole apples to survive, he was a man who could command wealth, fear, and admiration simultaneously. His style and demeanor became a language in themselves, one that communicated dominance and taste without a single word spoken. The interplay of refinement and violence fascinated those around him. Hollywood elites, accustomed to drama on screen, often underestimated the dangerous authenticity behind Bugsy's elegance. Socialites and actors might have assumed he was merely a charming rogue until they glimpsed the calculated intensity in his eyes or heard rumors of the deadly efficiency with which he handled betrayal. This contrast, glamour and menace, allure and danger, made Bugsy a figure who could dominate both rooms and headlines. Even as he built his reputation for taste, Bugsy's mind remained focused on projects that could turn his obsession with beauty and sophistication into something tangible and permanent. Casinos, nightclubs, and resorts became the natural extension of his personal style. If he could control the design, the clientele, and the atmosphere, he could essentially craft reality to his liking. The desire to impress was intertwined with the desire to dominate. The glint of neon lights in a desert hotel or the polished bar of a private club would be as much a testament to his vision as his wealth or power. However, this ambition was double-edged. The cost of creating such beauty was enormous, both financially and politically. Money could be lost faster than it could be made, and lavish projects drew scrutiny from syndicate leaders who valued efficiency over extravagance. Bugsy's relentless drive sometimes clashed with their cautious pragmatism, planting early seeds of tension that would later grow into distrust. But in his mind, the risk was worth it. Luxury was the gateway to immortality. Without beauty, style, and refinement, wealth was fleeting, only vision made it last. In the evenings, Bugsy often reflected on the contrast between the life he had built and the streets he had left behind. The narrow alleys and the dim lights of Brooklyn felt distant now, like shadows of someone else's story. Yet those experiences had forged him, had sharpened the instincts that allowed him to survive and thrive. Luxury, in his philosophy, was the ultimate weapon. It dazzled, it protected, and it concealed the violence that still lingered beneath. By the early 1940s, Bugsy Siegel's obsession with luxury and image had transformed him from a mere gangster into a figure who could move seamlessly between worlds, the criminal underworld, the social elite, and eventually the future empire of Las Vegas. Tailored suits and velvet-lined rooms were not just indulgences, they were instruments of influence, tools that allowed him to envision a future beyond profit, one of spectacle, legacy, and immortality. His pursuit of opulence was not shallow, it was the first step toward a dream that would change the American landscape forever. Bugsy's drive for refinement, however, came with a shadow. It amplified both his genius and his recklessness, creating tension with the syndicate, testing loyalties, and setting the stage for the greatest risk of his life. Building a city in the desert that would immortalize his vision. Luxury was no longer just an adornment, it was the language through which he intended to communicate his ambition, a prelude to a gamble that would be both magnificent and fatal. In every polished shoe, every crystal chandelier, and every tailored suit, the future of Las Vegas was already quietly taking shape in Bugsy Siegel's mind. By the early 1940s, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel had already carved a reputation that stretched from the streets of Brooklyn to the glittering corridors of Hollywood. Yet, despite the luxury and influence he had amassed on the West Coast, his mind hungered for something more, a project that could transcend money, violence, and fleeting fame. It was during this period that he first turned his attention eastward, not to New York, but south and inland to a place that, to most, seemed barren, desolate, and unremarkable, the Nevada desert. Where others saw sand and nothingness, Bugsy saw possibility. A vision began to form, not yet fully articulated, but dazzling in its audacity. The desert itself was harsh, unyielding, and vast. During the day, the sun burned relentlessly, casting long, distorted shadows over the rolling dunes. At night, the air cooled sharply, and the horizon stretched like a blank canvas under a canopy of stars. To a casual observer, it was empty and unforgiving. To Bugsy, it was a stage waiting for illumination, a place where he could create something entirely new. He imagined bright neon lights cutting through the darkness, bustling hotels rising from sand, and a city of gambling, glamour, and spectacle unlike anything America had ever seen. In his mind, it would be a playground for the wealthy, the ambitious, and the curious, a testament to what a man with vision could achieve. Bugsy's scouting trips across Nevada were meticulous. He would drive long stretches of empty highways, studying the land, noting access points, proximity to railways, and the sparse settlements that dotted the terrain. The desert presented logistical challenges, water scarcity, infrastructure gaps, and the remoteness from established populations, but to Bugsy, these were obstacles to be conquered, not reasons to retreat. He envisioned casinos that would be self-contained, luxurious retreats in the middle of nowhere, where visitors could escape reality and indulge in fantasy. This was more than gambling, it was theater, architecture, and experience fused into a single, hypnotic dream. He met with local businessmen, engineers, and landowners, asking questions that would have seemed absurd to anyone who thought only in terms of conventional development. How much would it cost to bring electricity? To build roads? To transport guests in comfort? Bugsy's questions were both practical and visionary. He wasn't content to simply build a gambling hall, he wanted an entire environment that exuded sophistication and excitement. To him, details mattered, lighting, decor, the flow of guests through the property, and the feeling of being somewhere extraordinary. Everything was considered, nothing was arbitrary. Alongside this technical planning, Bugsy imagined the human element, the clientele, staff, entertainers, and society that would populate this desert oasis. He wanted stars from Hollywood to visit, to mingle with gamblers, to lend their charisma and fame to his creation. He wanted to craft a place where anyone who entered would feel transported, as if stepping into a different reality. It wasn't enough for the place to be profitable, it had to be unforgettable, legendary, and enduring. This was Bugsy's genius. He saw gambling not as a simple transaction, but as theater, as spectacle, as an experience that could be shaped, curated, and controlled. The syndicate back east watched Bugsy's desert fascination with curiosity, and, at times, unease. Many older mob figures were skeptical. Nevada was a wilderness, the logistics complex, the financial risks enormous. To them, building a casino in the desert sounded like folly, an extravagance fueled by a man's ego more than profit. But Bugsy had always thrived where others doubted him. His charisma, combined with his proven record in organized crime, gave him leverage. He promised not just potential profit, but a revolutionary concept that could redefine the gambling business in America. During these trips, Bugsy's personality became part of the desert legend. He would walk the dry landscape in tailored suits, the sunlight glinting off his polished shoes, laughing at the audacity of the venture while simultaneously considering every operational detail. To those who accompanied him, he seemed both fearless and meticulous, visionary and exacting. His energy was infectious, his confidence persuasive. Men who might have balked at the challenge found themselves swept along by his conviction. They began to see not empty sand, but opportunity, and slowly the impossible began to feel inevitable. His desert vision was not limited to a single property. He imagined a city that could expand, a gambling metropolis that would rival the resorts of Atlantic City and the entertainment hubs of Hollywood. He considered transportation, entertainment, and hospitality, envisioning hotels, theaters, and lounges. The dream was comprehensive, a place where the wealthy could escape, gamble, be entertained, and return home impressed and enriched by the experience. Every detail mattered, from the angle of a hotel window to the quality of a cocktail glass. It was a meticulous orchestration, blending business acumen with artistic sensibility. Yet, beneath the surface of the dream, tension simmered. Bugsy's temperament, his penchant for extravagance, and his history of impulsive decisions made some syndicate members uneasy. His plans required significant funding, and delays or cost overruns would not be tolerated. Despite these concerns, Bugsy persisted, arguing that true vision demanded risk and daring. He believed that the reward, both financial and in legacy, would justify any temporary setbacks. His conviction was absolute. He was not merely building a casino, he was crafting a new era of entertainment and crime combined, a monument to ambition itself. As he walked the Nevada nights, Bugsy would sometimes pause and gaze at the stars. The desert wind carried both silence and possibility. He imagined neon lights illuminating the sand, music drifting across open-air terraces, and visitors marveling at a world that had sprung from nothing. This vision became an obsession, a mental blueprint that he would carry into every meeting, every negotiation, and every subsequent construction project. It was no longer enough to be powerful or feared, he wanted to be remembered, to create a tangible mark on history. The survey of the desert became a turning point in Bugsy Siegel's life. It crystallized his ambitions beyond the immediate thrill of money, crime, or personal notoriety. The flamingo, which would one day rise from these sands, began as an idea seeded in these early scouting trips. It represented everything Bugsy sought: glamour, spectacle, influence, and the audacity to reshape the American landscape. To him, Nevada was more than land, it was opportunity, freedom, and the canvas for a dream that was as bold as it was dangerous. In the stillness of the desert, amid endless horizons and shifting sands, Bugsy's vision took root. Unlike the chaotic streets of Brooklyn or the star-studded lounges of Los Angeles, the desert offered purity of purpose, space to create, and the promise of immortality. The man who had once fought over nickels in Williamsburg was now a visionary, imagining a city born of ambition, luxury, and spectacle. The desert was quiet, but Bugsy's mind was roaring. His plan was clear: where others saw emptiness, he would create wonder; where others hesitated, he would act. The stage was set, the stakes were monumental, and the dream of Las Vegas began to take shape under the relentless Nevada sun. By the mid-1940s, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel had firmly established himself as more than just a gangster. He was a visionary, a man whose ambitions stretched beyond the familiar streets of New York and the sun-soaked boulevards of Los Angeles. His mind, always restless, had become consumed with the idea of building a gambling paradise in the Nevada desert. Most people saw only sand, heat, and isolation. Bugsy saw opportunity, theater, and immortality. The project that would eventually become the Flamingo was no longer a distant dream, it was a burning obsession, a mission that would define his life and, ultimately, his legacy. The syndicate, ever pragmatic, approached the venture with cautious optimism. Leaders like Meyer Lansky supported Bugsy, trusting his vision and his connections, while others remained skeptical. Nevada was undeveloped, infrastructure was lacking, and the financial stakes were astronomical. Building a resort in the desert was uncharted territory, and the risks were enormous. Yet Bugsy thrived on risk. To him, hesitation was a weakness. He often argued that the desert's isolation was a feature, not a flaw. It offered a blank canvas, a place where he could create a controlled environment, a playground for the wealthy and influential. The initial stages of development were complex. Land had to be acquired, permits negotiated, and construction overseen with meticulous care. Bugsy's temperament, both a gift and a curse, became central to the process. His energy was relentless. He visited construction sites daily, demanding progress, inspecting every detail, and pushing workers to match the vision in his mind. He clashed with contractors, financiers, and even syndicate overseers, driven by an uncompromising standard of perfection. Bugsy did not settle for good enough. The flamingo had to be extraordinary. In designing the flamingo, Bugsy combined elements of luxury, spectacle, and psychological allure. Every aspect, from the architecture to the interior decor, was carefully considered. He envisioned a resort that would captivate guests the moment they arrived, an experience that blended elegance, excitement, and danger. Neon lights would pierce the desert night, music would flow through open-air terraces, and every detail, from the cocktail glasses to the carpeting, would contribute to a sense of wonder. Bugsy's genius lay in understanding that gambling was not just about money, it was about environment, ambience, and experience. Financing the project was another challenge entirely. Bugsy relied on funds from the syndicate, but managing such a large-scale operation required constant persuasion and careful justification. Skeptical members demanded accountability, wary of his tendency toward extravagance. Bugsy, ever charismatic and persuasive, assured them that the risks were calculated, that his vision would deliver both profit and prestige. He presented the flamingo not merely as a gambling house, but as a revolutionary concept that would redefine entertainment and luxury in America. The construction itself became a spectacle. Workers labored in the harsh Nevada heat, while Bugsy oversaw progress, often appearing in person to make adjustments, offer instructions, and inspire commitment. His reputation preceded him. He was a man who could charm, intimidate, and motivate in equal measure. Men who might have balked at the scale of the project found themselves swept along by his vision. The desert, once barren, slowly began to take shape under his relentless drive. Foundations were laid, walls rose, and the beginnings of what would become a landmark emerged from the sand. Yet, the project was not without conflict. Rival gangsters, jealous or wary of Bugsy's influence, sometimes threatened construction crews or attempted to sabotage progress. Legal authorities monitored the operation closely, suspicious of any large sums of cash moving through Nevada. Bugsy navigated these challenges with a combination of diplomacy, persuasion, and occasional force. He balanced the demands of the syndicate, the expectations of financiers, and the unpredictability of human nature with remarkable skill, all while maintaining the vision that drove him forward. Amid the chaos of construction, Bugsy maintained his characteristic flair. He mingled with Hollywood stars, entertained guests in Los Angeles, and ensured that his personal brand remained impeccable. Even as he dealt with logistical nightmares, he never lost sight of the flamingo's intended experience, a place where elegance met excitement, where the ordinary transformed into the extraordinary. Every decision, from the placement of a light fixture to the hiring of entertainers, was infused with his signature style and ambition. Financial pressures, however, began to mount. Costs far exceeded initial estimates, and delays tested the patience of the syndicate and financiers alike. Bugsy's insistence on perfection and his tendency toward impulsive expenditures fueled rumors that the project might fail. Yet, despite setbacks and growing tension, he remained undeterred. In his mind, the flamingo was more than a business, it was a testament to his vision, his ingenuity, and his unrelenting drive. He believed that the gamble, no matter how great, would ultimately pay off in both money and legacy. During this period, Bugsy's personal life intertwined with his professional ambitions. His relationships, his charm, and his charisma played a role in attracting investors, allies, and supporters. Women were drawn to him not merely for his wealth, but for the aura of danger and sophistication he carried. Men respected him for his audacity and fearlessness. In every interaction, he projected the confidence of a man who believed in the inevitability of his success, a belief that would inspire loyalty and fear in equal measure. The flamingo, as it slowly emerged from the desert, became a symbol of possibility. Bugsy's meticulous attention to detail ensured that no aspect was overlooked. From luxurious rooms to glittering casinos, from entertainment venues to landscaped gardens, the resort promised an experience unlike any other. It was designed not only to attract gamblers, but to captivate the imagination of all who visited, a city of dreams in the middle of the desert, born entirely from one man's ambition. Yet, as construction neared completion, tension reached its peak. Skeptical syndicate members questioned the enormous investment, while rumors circulated about mismanagement and extravagance. Bugsy, aware of the scrutiny, became increasingly defensive, combining charm with veiled threats to protect his project. His obsession with the flamingo was total, failure was unthinkable. He had invested not only money but identity, reputation, and personal pride into the venture. In this critical period, Bugsy Siegel's genius and recklessness converged. His vision was unprecedented, his ambition unparalleled, and his methods audacious. The Flamingo was more than a gambling resort, it was the embodiment of a dream, a tangible manifestation of a man who had transcended his past to shape the future. Every brick laid, every light installed, every detail perfected reflected his relentless pursuit of excellence, style, and legacy. As the Flamingo prepared to open, the world watched with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Would this desert dream succeed or collapse under its own weight? Bugsy's reputation, built on charm, violence, and brilliance, hung in the balance. Yet he remained undeterred, convinced that his vision would not only triumph, but define an era. In the heart of the Nevada desert, under the blazing sun and starry nights, Bugsy Siegel's dream was about to become reality, a gamble so audacious it would leave an indelible mark on history, forever intertwining his name with the birth of Las Vegas. The opening of the Flamingo was an event unlike anything the Nevada desert had ever witnessed. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel had poured not only his money but his soul into the project, transforming barren land into a glittering oasis that promised glamour, excitement, and indulgence. Yet, as the grand unveiling approached, tension simmered beneath the surface. Syndicate leaders who had financed the venture watched nervously, aware of the unprecedented scale and risk. Rumors of cost overruns, delays, and extravagance had already reached their ears. For them, the Flamingo was a test, not just of the desert, but of Bugsy Siegel himself. The construction had been arduous. Desert heat had scorched workers, winds had shifted sand onto foundations, and supply lines had been stretched to the limit. Yet, through every obstacle, Bugsy had remained relentless. He had overseen every detail personally, the arrangement of furniture, the design of lighting, the color of carpets, the placement of neon signs that would pierce the night sky. Nothing was too small for his scrutiny. To him, perfection was non-negotiable, and the Flamingo had to reflect not just luxury, but artistry and vision. As the opening night drew near, Hollywood stars mingled with mob figures, financiers, and curious spectators. The contrast of elegance and danger electrified the air. Bugsy, ever the showman, understood that perception was as important as reality. His charm, charisma, and reputation preceded him, drawing attention to the event like a magnet. Guests arrived in limousines, dressed to impress, and were met with the spectacle of a neon-lit paradise rising from the desert sands. Music floated through the air, laughter mingled with the clinking of glasses, and the casino floors buzzed with anticipation. Yet, behind the glitter, Bugsy's nerves were taut. He had invested more than money, he had staked his reputation, his relationships, and the trust of the syndicate. One misstep could unravel everything he had built. Contractors, designers, and entertainers worked tirelessly to ensure the opening was flawless, but the desert, unpredictable as always, seemed intent on testing them. Electrical systems faltered, plumbing needed last-minute adjustments, and staff were stretched to their limits. Bugsy's temper, infamous and combustible, flared as he confronted each problem, demanding immediate solutions. Despite the chaos, Bugsy maintained an air of effortless control. His tailored suit, slicked back hair, and sharp gaze conveyed authority and confidence. He greeted guests with charm, moving seamlessly between Hollywood elites and underworld figures, bridging two worlds that rarely intersected. To many, he seemed untouchable, a man who could command both respect and fear with equal ease. His ability to navigate this complex social landscape was a testament to the combination of intelligence, charisma, and audacity that defined him. The casino itself was a marvel. Tables gleamed under carefully arranged lighting, chips stacked in precise columns, and roulette wheels spun with hypnotic allure. Guests found themselves captivated not only by the games but by the atmosphere Bugsy had orchestrated. The Flamingo was more than a gambling resort, it was an immersive experience, a theater of indulgence where every detail contributed to a sense of wonder. Bugsy's genius lay in understanding human psychology. He created environments that encouraged risk, excitement, and participation, drawing visitors into a carefully choreographed dance of chance and pleasure. However, the success of opening night did not erase the mounting pressures. Costs had skyrocketed far beyond initial estimates, straining relationships with the syndicate. Bugsy's insistence on quality and spectacle, while visionary, had tested the patience of financiers and partners. Reports circulated of overspending and mismanagement, fueling doubts about whether the Flamingo could ever turn a profit. Yet, Bugsy remained unshaken. In his mind, the temporary setbacks were inconsequential compared to the lasting impact of his creation. He had built more than a casino, he had built a legend in the making. The media, though limited in coverage, began to notice. Hollywood gossip columns hinted at the daring, stylish figure behind the Flamingo's creation. Celebrities who attended spoke of the breathtaking desert lights, the elegance of the rooms, and the thrill of the gaming floor. Bugsy's name, once whispered in fear on the streets of Brooklyn, now carried a glamorous connotation in certain circles. He had managed to transform from notorious gangster to visionary entrepreneur, blurring the lines between criminal infamy and legitimate acclaim. Yet, the Flamingo's opening also illuminated vulnerabilities. Maintaining such an extravagant establishment in the unforgiving desert required constant oversight, innovation, and risk-taking. Supply chains, staffing, security, and guest experience demanded Bugsy's personal attention, stretching him thin. Moreover, the ever-watchful syndicate monitored every dollar, every decision, and every rumor of inefficiency. Bugsy's boldness, while necessary for creation, now drew scrutiny, as the very qualities that had driven the project's success were the same ones that could precipitate his downfall. Social dynamics within the Flamingo were equally complex. Hollywood stars mingled with mob associates, creating an intricate dance of influence, ambition, and subtle intimidation. Bugsy's role as host, enforcer, and visionary required constant adaptability. He needed to inspire confidence in financiers, charm celebrities, and maintain authority over staff, all while managing the operational challenges of a large-scale gambling operation in a remote location. His charisma was a critical tool, one that allowed him to navigate these overlapping worlds with apparent ease. As the Flamingo settled into its early operations, it became clear that Bugsy Siegel had created something unprecedented. The resort was not merely profitable, it was transformative, redefining what a casino could be and establishing Las Vegas as a destination for wealth, excitement, and spectacle. Yet, the tension between vision and reality persisted. High costs, operational challenges, and the scrutiny of the syndicate loomed over every success. Bugsy's genius lay in his ability to hold these pressures in balance, maintaining the aura of confidence and inevitability that kept allies and investors aligned with his ambitious goals. The Flamingo's opening represented a culmination of Bugsy Siegel's personal evolution, from a streetwise enforcer in Brooklyn to a sophisticated, fearless visionary in the Nevada desert. He had taken his knowledge of human behavior, charm, and intimidation, combining it with an audacious vision of luxury and spectacle, to create an environment that captivated and controlled all who entered. Yet, in the midst of success, challenges remained, tension simmered, and the stakes continued to rise. In every corner of the Flamingo, Bugsy's presence was felt. The music, lighting, and design reflected his meticulous attention to detail, the staff followed his instructions, the guests were drawn into the world he had imagined. He had not merely built a casino, he had created an experience that blurred reality and fantasy, crime and culture, ambition and indulgence. The flamingo, as it came alive in the desert night, stood as a testament to a man who refused to settle for ordinary, who gambled not just with money, but with history itself. As the first nights passed and the neon lights glowed against the desert darkness, one fact became undeniable: Bugsy Siegel had changed the landscape of gambling, entertainment, and ambition in America. The Flamingo was more than a building, it was an idea, a revolution in luxury, spectacle, and risk. And at the center of it all stood Bugsy himself, both creator and symbol, navigating the delicate balance between genius and recklessness, ambition and danger, triumph and impending crisis. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the drama of Las Vegas, and of Bugsy Siegel's life, was only beginning to unfold. The early days of the Flamingo were a whirlwind of glamour, tension, and unrelenting pressure. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel had poured every ounce of his energy, creativity, and wealth into the project, transforming a barren stretch of Nevada desert into a gleaming symbol of ambition and luxury. Yet, even as neon lights illuminated the property and guests arrived eager for the thrill of chance and spectacle, the undercurrents of risk and danger were impossible to ignore. Bugsy's dream, while dazzling, was fragile, built on enormous debt, syndicate patience, and a desert landscape that refused to forgive mistakes. From the moment the first guests walked through the Flamingo's doors, Bugsy's vision came alive. The atmosphere was electric, roulette wheels spun hypnotically, poker chips clattered, and the scent of fine cigars mingled with the sweetness of expensive cocktails. Every detail had been meticulously curated: the arrangement of furniture, the glimmer of chandeliers, the layout of the gaming floor, all designed to captivate, delight, and subtly manipulate human behavior. Bugsy understood that gambling was not merely about money, it was about psychology, environment, and experience. He had created a stage on which his patrons would willingly surrender their inhibitions, their caution, and often, their fortunes. Hollywood stars mingled with mob associates, journalists, and wealthy travelers, creating a surreal interplay of glamour and danger. Bugsy moved effortlessly among them, a chameleon blending menace and charm. He was a master of impression. To the financiers, he was a responsible visionary; to the entertainers, a charismatic host; to the syndicate, a man whose bold vision could either generate unprecedented profits or catastrophic losses. Each interaction required subtlety, persuasion, and careful calibration, and Bugsy excelled at all three. However, beneath the surface of success, tension simmered. Costs had ballooned far beyond initial estimates. Syndicate leaders, who had trusted Bugsy's instincts and record, began to express unease. Delays, unexpected construction challenges, and the desert's harsh environment had strained both finances and patience. Bugsy's insistence on perfection, on creating an experience unmatched anywhere, meant expenditures that were difficult to justify. To the syndicate, the Flamingo was no longer merely a gamble, it was a test of loyalty, judgment, and trust. Despite these pressures, Bugsy remained undeterred. His vision was not constrained by conventional logic or cautious pragmatism. Where others saw a risk, he saw potential; where others hesitated, he acted decisively. His mind teemed with solutions to logistical problems, improvements to the resort's layout, and strategies for attracting high-profile guests. He understood that perception was as important as reality, and that the Flamingo's reputation, both as a gambling haven and a spectacle of luxury, would ultimately determine its success. Every evening, Bugsy oversaw operations personally. He walked the casino floors, observed the behavior of patrons, and adjusted procedures in real time. He trained staff to anticipate guests' needs, to maintain impeccable service, and to subtly encourage the thrill of gambling. Even small details, a perfectly folded napkin, the placement of a chip tray, the positioning of a dealer, were subject to his scrutiny. For Bugsy, the Flamingo was a living organism, one that required constant attention, refinement, and control. Simultaneously, Bugsy faced external threats. Rival mobsters watched the operation with envy and suspicion. Legal authorities monitored the property, wary of the large sums of cash and the influx of visitors in a remote location. The harsh desert environment itself was unforgiving, supply chains were fragile, equipment prone to malfunction, and staffing challenging. Bugsy navigated these challenges with a combination of diplomacy, intimidation, and ingenuity. His ability to manage risk on multiple fronts, financial, operational, social, and legal, was a testament to both his intelligence and his audacity. The social dynamics within the Flamingo were equally complex. Hollywood stars, gamblers, and underworld figures coexisted in a delicate balance, each drawn by opportunity, ambition, or curiosity. Bugsy's charisma allowed him to mediate interactions, foster loyalty, and maintain authority. He understood the power of spectacle and narrative, ensuring that every guest felt part of something extraordinary. The Flamingo was not merely a place to gamble, it was an experience, a performance, a story in which every participant played a role, and Bugsy was both author and director. Financial pressures remained constant. Costs had skyrocketed, and early revenue, while promising, did not immediately cover expenditures. Syndicate oversight was intense, backers demanded accountability and results. Bugsy's responses combined charm, persuasion, and subtle assertion of his authority. He framed the venture not merely as a business, but as a revolutionary concept, an investment in the future of gambling, entertainment, and Las Vegas itself. He positioned himself not as a risk-taker, but as a visionary whose audacity would ultimately generate unmatched returns. Despite the strain, the Flamingo became a cultural phenomenon. Guests marveled at its architecture, ambience, and the thrill of the gaming experience. Word of the resort spread rapidly, attracting a mix of curiosity seekers, wealthy gamblers, and those eager to witness a place where elegance and danger coexisted. Bugsy's personality infused every aspect of the resort, his flair, risk-taking, and meticulous attention to detail were visible in every corner. The Flamingo became not only a financial enterprise but a symbol of audacity, ambition, and style. Bugsy's personal evolution continued alongside the resort's growth. He moved seamlessly between worlds, the criminal underworld, Hollywood's elite, and high-stakes financial backers, maintaining a persona that was both charming and formidable. Relationships, alliances, and influence were leveraged to secure resources, mitigate threats, and enhance the resort's reputation. Bugsy understood that success required mastery of both tangible operations and intangible perceptions. His ability to orchestrate these layers of complexity distinguished him from peers and solidified his role as a central figure in the creation of modern Las Vegas. Yet, even amidst success, danger lurked. Financial strain, syndicate scrutiny, and the volatility of human ambition created a pressure cooker environment. Bugsy's temper and impulsiveness, while previously assets in negotiation and enforcement, now posed potential risks. Balancing creativity, operational demands, and personal relationships required constant vigilance. One misstep could unravel months of work, erode trust, and jeopardize both the resort and his own life. The Flamingo, in its early operations, was therefore a microcosm of Bugsy Siegel himself, dazzling, audacious, complex, and precariously balanced. Every roulette spin, every cocktail served, every guest interaction reflected his influence. The resort's success depended not only on its design and concept, but on Bugsy's energy, decisions, and ability to navigate tension and risk. He had transformed a desert landscape into a theater of ambition, yet the ultimate test, financial stability, syndicate approval, and enduring legacy, remained ahead. As the Flamingo began to establish its presence in the desert, it became clear that Bugsy Siegel had redefined the possibilities of gambling, entertainment, and entrepreneurship in America. The project was more than a casino, it was a vision brought to life, an audacious gamble on scale, style, and human psychology. But with every success came mounting pressure, and with every triumph came the reminder that in Bugsy's world, the line between brilliance and catastrophe was perilously thin. The stakes had never been higher, and the drama that would shape his destiny was only just beginning. The success of the Flamingo was intoxicating, but it was only the beginning of a storm that would define Benjamin Bugsy Siegel's final years. By 1946, the resort had opened its doors, and while it dazzled visitors with its neon lights, luxurious decor, and glamorous atmosphere, the financial reality was far more complicated. The costs of construction had spiraled far beyond initial estimates, leaving enormous debts and a trail of anxious syndicate investors. Bugsy's relentless pursuit of perfection and his insistence on extraordinary standards had created a spectacle unlike anything seen before, but it had also created a liability that threatened to undo everything he had built. As guests marveled at the elegance of the Flamingo, Bugsy's personal pressures mounted. Syndicate leaders from New York and Chicago demanded accountability, scrutinizing every dollar and questioning the feasibility of maintaining such an extravagant establishment in the Nevada desert. To them, Bugsy's charm, while undeniable, was not a sufficient guarantee of financial return. Meetings, phone calls, and correspondences stretched long into the night as he tried to explain, defend, and justify his decisions. Yet Bugsy remained steadfast, convinced that the Flamingo would soon become a self-sustaining empire, a gamble that would reward both profit and legacy. The opening of the resort had drawn celebrities, socialites, and influential figures, turning the Flamingo into a hotspot for both Hollywood glamour and high-stakes gambling. Bugsy moved through the crowds with his usual blend of charm and menace, effortlessly bridging the worlds of luxury and organized crime. He welcomed stars like George Raft and other Hollywood luminaries, ensuring their presence lent legitimacy and excitement to the venture. To Bugsy, the success of the Flamingo was not only measured in dollars but in cultural influence. How many people knew his name, how many experienced the thrill of his creation, how many felt captivated by the world he had meticulously crafted. Yet beneath the glittering surface, the cracks were widening. Operational challenges emerged almost daily, staff shortages, equipment failures, and the harsh desert environment tested even the most meticulous plans. Bugsy's hands-on management style, once a source of brilliance, now placed him at the center of every problem. He inspected rooms, supervised casino floors, and personally mediated disputes, often at the cost of sleep, health, and composure. The Flamingo was a living organism, and its survival depended on his ceaseless attention. Financially, the situation was precarious. The construction debts were massive, and early revenue, though promising, could not immediately offset the overspending. Syndicate patience, which had carried him through the ambitious project, was wearing thin. Rumors of mismanagement, extravagance, and potential failure circulated among his backers. To the men who had financed his dream, Bugsy's personal flair and perfectionism were as troubling as they were impressive. Each delay and expense became a test of loyalty, ingenuity, and persuasive ability. Bugsy's response was characteristic. He doubled down on his vision. He refined operations, encouraged high-profile guests, and implemented strategies to increase revenue while maintaining the resort's allure. He understood the psychology of his clientele, how design, ambience, and entertainment could influence spending. Dealers and staff were trained not just in games, but in the art of persuasion and hospitality. Bugsy's genius lay in turning ordinary gambling into an immersive experience, where luxury and thrill intertwined, keeping guests enchanted and invested. The social landscape of the Flamingo added another layer of complexity. Hollywood elites, syndicate figures, and wealthy gamblers mingled in a delicate dance of power, ambition, and fascination. Bugsy's charisma allowed him to mediate tensions, inspire loyalty, and project authority. Yet this blending of worlds also attracted scrutiny, from journalists, law enforcement, and rival mob figures who viewed his success with envy and suspicion. Every decision carried consequences beyond the immediate scope of operations, and Bugsy had to navigate these pressures with both caution and daring. Despite the mounting pressures, the Flamingo began to establish its presence in Las Vegas. Guests were captivated by its neon brilliance against the desert night, the thrill of chance on the casino floors, and the illusion of glamour and sophistication. Bugsy's vision had become tangible, a place where ordinary boundaries of law, wealth, and experience blurred. Yet the financial instability and external pressures loomed like shadows behind the lights, a constant reminder that brilliance and disaster often walked hand in hand. As the months passed, the syndicate's patience waned. While some members admired Bugsy's audacity and foresight, others were frustrated by delays, overspending, and operational hiccups. Meetings with financiers became increasingly tense, with Bugsy defending both the project and his reputation. His responses combined charm, confidence, and veiled assertion, projecting the aura of inevitability. The flamingo would succeed, and the doubters would eventually be proven wrong. But behind the bravado, the risks were real, and every setback carried potential consequences that could reach far beyond Nevada. During this period, Bugsy's personality, his charisma, temper, and audacity, shaped both the operation and its perception. He was a man who commanded attention, who could charm a room into loyalty or intimidate a skeptic into submission. He understood that the success of the Flamingo depended not only on architecture, finance, or service, but on the mythos he created around it, a gangster-turned-visionary, a man who bridged danger and sophistication, whose very presence lent the resort its aura of intrigue and excitement. Yet, as the resort began to operate, tensions intensified between personal ambition and organizational expectations. The syndicate's oversight was constant, and Bugsy's impulsive nature, combined with the immense financial risk, created friction. He was no longer just a gangster or an entrepreneur, he was the embodiment of a gamble, both literal and metaphorical. Every decision, every interaction, and every night of operation carried the weight of enormous expectations, and the line between triumph and catastrophe grew ever thinner. In the midst of this turbulent period, the Flamingo remained a cultural beacon. Visitors marveled at the combination of elegance, danger, and spectacle. Bugsy's genius in orchestrating human behavior, atmosphere, and thrill was evident everywhere, from the arrangement of tables to the flow of entertainment, from staff demeanor to guest experience. He had created more than a casino, he had created an experience, a narrative, and a vision of what Las Vegas could become. Yet, the mounting pressures foreshadowed the trials to come. The syndicate's scrutiny, financial instability, and the unpredictable nature of human ambition created a precarious environment. Bugsy Siegel, whose audacity and vision had made the Flamingo possible, now stood at a crossroads. The choices he made in the months following the opening would determine not only the resort's fate but his own. The stage was set for drama, conflict, and tragedy, a culmination of ambition, brilliance, and risk that would ultimately define his legacy and reshape the American landscape of gambling forever. The Flamingo, dazzling and ambitious, was more than a gamble on money, it was a gamble on a man. Bugsy's vision, brilliance, and obsession were fully intertwined with its fate. Every neon light, every spinning roulette wheel, and every elegant detail reflected his identity, ambition, and audacity. In the Nevada desert, amid glamour, danger, and the relentless weight of expectation, Bugsy Siegel's dream had become reality, but reality, in all its complexity, carried consequences that no amount of charm, audacity, or skill could fully control. The pressures surrounding Benjamin Bugsy Siegel reached a breaking point in the months following the opening of the Flamingo. While the resort dazzled guests with its neon brilliance and luxurious accommodations, the financial realities were unforgiving. Costs had soared far beyond the original projections, and revenue had yet to stabilize sufficiently to satisfy the syndicate investors who had backed the project. Bugsy's perfectionism, which had driven the Flamingo to unprecedented heights of luxury and spectacle, was now being scrutinized as recklessness. Every delay, every extravagant detail, and every dollar spent became a focal point for both criticism and concern. Despite the mounting tension, Bugsy continued to operate with the same relentless energy and charisma that had defined his career. He walked the casino floors with a commanding presence, ensuring that every guest experience met his high standards. Dealers were trained to observe patrons' behaviors, subtly influencing the pace and flow of the games. Staff were reminded constantly that the Flamingo was not merely a resort, but a stage, a carefully choreographed environment designed to enthrall, excite, and captivate. Bugsy understood human psychology in a way few men of his era did. He knew how to manipulate environment and perception to maximize engagement and spending. The dual pressures of public expectation and syndicate oversight weighed heavily on him. Syndicate leaders demanded accountability, concerned that the enormous investment might not yield sufficient returns. Bugsy faced a constant stream of inquiries, meetings, and letters demanding explanations for delays and overspending. His typical charm and persuasive abilities were tested to the limits. He had to maintain appearances of confidence and competence, even when financial strain and operational challenges threatened to undermine both. Every decision became a delicate balancing act between practical management and visionary ambition. Socially, Bugsy's position was complex and fraught with tension. The Flamingo had attracted Hollywood stars, wealthy gamblers, and mob figures alike, creating a microcosm of power, influence, and intrigue. Navigating these overlapping worlds required constant adaptability. Bugsy's charisma allowed him to manage interactions, inspire loyalty, and maintain authority, but it also exposed him to envy and resentment. Celebrities might admire his flair, financiers might doubt his judgment, and rivals might seek opportunities to exploit his vulnerabilities. The Flamingo was not just a casino, it was a nexus of relationships, each carrying consequences that could ripple far beyond the desert sands. As the resort continued to operate, the financial strain became increasingly visible. Delays in recouping construction costs and the ongoing demands of maintaining a luxurious and high-functioning operation intensified pressure on Bugsy. Syndicate patience, once generous due to his reputation and past successes, began to erode. Meetings that had previously been cordial and supportive now included pointed questions and veiled threats. Bugsy's temper, already well known, sometimes flared, creating further tension. Yet, even under scrutiny, he remained focused on his vision. The Flamingo was more than a business venture, it was a manifestation of his ambition, his creativity, and his desire to leave a lasting mark. The psychological toll of this period cannot be understated. Bugsy's personal life, intertwined with his professional responsibilities, was fraught with complexity. Relationships, both romantic and professional, were shaped by his intense personality and relentless drive. Women were drawn to his charm and danger, associates were drawn to his vision and audacity. Yet this same intensity created vulnerabilities, as it exposed him to jealousy, resentment, and betrayal. Bugsy's genius lay in his ability to inspire loyalty and admiration even as he navigated these volatile interpersonal dynamics. The operational challenges of maintaining the Flamingo were relentless. Desert logistics, staff coordination, supply chains, and guest satisfaction demanded constant oversight. Bugsy personally inspected rooms, checked casino operations, and ensured that entertainment met his high standards. He understood that any lapse could undermine both revenue and reputation. The Flamingo was not merely a casino, it was a living entity, one that required attention, refinement, and constant adaptation. Every roulette wheel, every chandelier, and every interaction was part of a larger, meticulously orchestrated vision. At the same time, rival mob figures and law enforcement continued to monitor Bugsy and his operations. The combination of high stakes, public attention, and the syndicate's interest created a pressure cooker environment. Bugsy's ability to maintain control, charm allies, intimidate rivals, and execute his vision simultaneously was a testament to his intelligence, audacity, and resilience. Yet, it also highlighted the precarious nature of his position. In a world where loyalty was conditional and power was fleeting, the margin for error was razor-thin. Despite these pressures, the Flamingo's allure remained undeniable. Guests were captivated by the combination of luxury, excitement, and spectacle. Bugsy's genius in orchestrating human experience ensured that patrons were continually engaged and entertained. Yet, beneath the surface, the financial fragility and operational stress persisted, creating a tension that would ultimately define Bugsy's final chapter. The success of the Flamingo, as brilliant as it appeared, was inseparable from the risks, pressures, and personal sacrifices that accompanied its creation and operation. As 1947 approached, the stakes could not have been higher. Syndicate patience was nearly exhausted, financial scrutiny intensified, and Bugsy's bold vision faced the ultimate test. Every decision, every interaction, and every outcome carried profound consequences. The Flamingo was more than a gamble on money, it was a gamble on Bugsy himself, his reputation, and his life. His legacy, ambition, and very survival were intertwined with the success or failure of the project he had brought from a desert dream into dazzling reality. In this crucible of pressure, genius, and risk, Bugsy Siegel's life reached a critical turning point. The Flamingo had achieved brilliance, capturing imagination and transforming Las Vegas into a symbol of luxury and spectacle. Yet the enormous debts, syndicate scrutiny, and personal vulnerabilities loomed over every triumph. Bugsy's ability to navigate these forces would ultimately determine not only the future of his iconic resort but also the fate of the man who had dared to envision a city in the desert where dreams, danger, and ambition converged. In the midst of glamour and tension, it became clear that the story of Bugsy Siegel and the Flamingo was no ordinary tale of crime or enterprise. It was a story of vision and obsession, brilliance and recklessness, and the fragile balance between triumph and disaster. The Flamingo stood as a testament to what one man's imagination, audacity, and determination could achieve, but it also stood as a reminder that even the greatest dreams carry the weight of peril, and that ambition, no matter how brilliant, can be as dangerous as it is transformative. The opening months of the Flamingo were therefore a crucible in which Bugsy Siegel's talents, temperament, and vision were tested to their limits. Success and risk were inseparable, charm and menace were tools of survival, luxury and spectacle were instruments of influence. Every detail of the resort, from its neon lights to its gaming tables, reflected Bugsy's identity and ambition. And as the desert night stretched on, it became evident that the next chapters of his life, fraught with tension, conflict, and ultimate tragedy, were inextricably linked to the very empire he had created. The months following the opening of the Flamingo were a tense and precarious time for Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. While the resort had dazzled visitors and begun to establish itself as a symbol of luxury and excitement in the Nevada desert, the reality behind the neon lights was far more complicated. Construction debts had soared to astronomical levels, operational costs were relentless, and syndicate patience was beginning to fray. Bugsy's insistence on perfection and his willingness to spend extravagantly on every detail, from imported furniture to lavish entertainment, had pushed the project into the realm of audacious genius but also into financial instability. Every day became a delicate balancing act, as he attempted to navigate the dual pressures of maintaining the Flamingo's allure while appeasing investors and syndicate overseers who questioned his methods. Despite these pressures, Bugsy remained determined to protect his vision. He believed that the Flamingo was more than a casino, it was an experience, an innovation, and an enduring legacy that would redefine Las Vegas. His attention to detail was meticulous, the placement of every light, the color palette of each room, the design of the gaming floor, and even the arrangement of cocktail glasses were scrutinized. He understood that the resort's power lay not merely in the gambling it offered, but in the atmosphere it created, the sense of entering a world that was simultaneously glamorous, thrilling, and slightly dangerous. Bugsy's genius was in crafting an environment that manipulated human behavior, encouraging guests to linger, gamble, and immerse themselves in the experience he had envisioned. The social dynamics surrounding the Flamingo added layers of complexity. Hollywood stars, high rollers, mob figures, and journalists mingled in an intricate dance of influence, opportunity, and subtle intimidation. Bugsy moved effortlessly among them, using charm and charisma to maintain control, inspire loyalty, and enforce authority when necessary. He knew how to manage perception as much as reality, ensuring that his creation was not just functional but legendary. His personal presence became part of the resort's allure. Patrons were drawn not only to the games and luxury but also to the mythos surrounding its creator, a gangster-turned-visionary whose audacity had brought a desert dream to life. Operationally, the Flamingo demanded constant vigilance. The harsh desert environment presented unique challenges, supply lines were fragile, equipment could fail without warning, and staffing required careful management. Bugsy personally supervised much of the day-to-day operation, walking the casino floors, inspecting rooms, mediating disputes, and ensuring that the entertainment and hospitality maintained the highest standards. His hands-on approach, though exhausting, reinforced the sense that every detail was essential and that the flamingo was a living entity requiring constant care. Guests might only see the neon glow and elegant interiors, but Bugsy understood that sustaining the experience demanded relentless attention behind the scenes. Financial scrutiny from the syndicate intensified. While some members admired Bugsy's vision and audacity, others questioned the enormous investment and the ongoing operational deficits. Meetings became tense, with demands for explanations, accountability, and proof that the flamingo would eventually generate sustainable profits. Bugsy's responses combined charm, persuasion, and a subtle assertion of authority. He framed the project not merely as a gamble in monetary terms, but as a revolutionary venture that would transform the gambling and entertainment landscape of America. His confidence was both a reassurance and a challenge, proof that he believed in the inevitability of his success. The pressure of this period took a psychological toll. Bugsy's personality, intense, charismatic, impulsive, was both a tool and a vulnerability. While it allowed him to inspire loyalty and awe, it also exposed him to scrutiny, jealousy, and rivalry. He navigated these challenges with a mixture of confidence and daring, understanding that his personal reputation was as crucial to the flamingo's success as its operational efficiency. Relationships with syndicate members, Hollywood figures, and key staff required constant management, as any misstep could have repercussions both immediate and long-lasting. Even as financial tensions mounted, the flamingo's reputation flourished. Guests were captivated by the combination of elegance, thrill, and spectacle. Bugsy's understanding of human psychology, combined with his meticulous orchestration of environment and experience, ensured that patrons returned, spent money, and spread word of the resort's unique allure. The Flamingo had become more than a casino, it was a destination, a theater of indulgence, and a symbol of audacity. Bugsy's fingerprints were visible in every detail, from the layout of the gaming floor to the choreography of guest movement and engagement. However, the pressures were far from over. Syndicate scrutiny was relentless, and Bugsy's personal behavior, rumored extravagances, temper flares, and unpredictable decisions, added to the tension. His insistence on control and perfection, while central to the Flamingo's identity, made him a figure of both admiration and concern. Every success was shadowed by the awareness that failure, whether financial, operational, or personal, could be catastrophic. Bugsy's life had become inseparable from the Flamingo, its fate was his fate, and every challenge it faced reflected back on him personally. As 1947 progressed, the stakes escalated. The Flamingo was operational and captivating the public, yet financial sustainability remained uncertain. The syndicate's patience was approaching its limit. Bugsy's personal charisma and persuasive skills had kept doubt at bay, but even the most skilled negotiator has limits. The pressures converged on him from every angle: operational challenges, financial strain, social obligations, and the unrelenting gaze of powerful backers. Bugsy Siegel's dream had materialized into one of the most iconic resorts in American history, but it had also placed him at the center of a complex web of expectations, risks, and potential consequences. Amid the tension, Bugsy's brilliance was evident. He continued to innovate, to refine the guest experience, and to maintain the mythos of the Flamingo as a destination unlike any other. Yet the extraordinary costs, combined with personal and professional pressures, created a precarious balance. One misstep could unravel months of careful planning and years of reputation. Bugsy's genius was inseparable from his volatility, and the fine line between triumph and disaster had never been more apparent. The Flamingo, in all its splendor, stood as a testament to Bugsy Siegel's vision and audacity. But beyond the glittering lights and glamorous facade, the undercurrents of tension, debt, and scrutiny were ever present. The months following its opening were a crucible, testing Bugsy's ability to manage not only an extraordinary business venture but also the delicate network of relationships, expectations, and risks that accompanied it. It was a period defined by brilliance, pressure, and the looming possibility of both success and calamity. In these critical months, Bugsy Siegel embodied both the promise and peril of unrestrained ambition. The Flamingo's achievements were remarkable, yet inseparable from the pressures and dangers that accompanied its creation. The resort had transformed the landscape of Las Vegas, established a cultural phenomenon, and cemented Bugsy's reputation as a visionary. Yet the stakes were immense, the pressures relentless, and the balance between triumph and catastrophe hung by a thread. In this tension, the story of Bugsy and the Flamingo reached its most compelling, suspenseful, and ultimately tragic phase, a phase where vision, risk, and human frailty converged in ways that would define history. The period following the initial months of the Flamingo's operation marked a turning point in Benjamin Bugsy Siegel's life and the trajectory of his infamous resort. While the neon lights and luxurious interiors continued to draw guests, the pressures behind the scenes were mounting, and the delicate balance Bugsy had maintained was beginning to fracture. Syndicate leaders, who had once backed his audacious vision with cautious optimism, now scrutinized every expense, every delay, and every operational hiccup. To them, the Flamingo was no longer merely a bold investment, it was a test of loyalty, judgment, and ultimately, control. Bugsy's brilliance had created a spectacle, but it had also birthed a web of expectations that could tighten around him with dangerous force. Bugsy's personality, always a mix of charm, charisma, and volatility, was both his greatest asset and his most dangerous liability. On the casino floor, he projected the confidence of a man in total command, charming Hollywood stars, intimidating rivals, and inspiring staff to meet his exacting standards. Off the floor, however, the weight of debts, oversight, and the relentless glare of the syndicate pressed on him. Even the most mundane decisions, scheduling performers, managing supply chains, or adjusting casino layouts, carried the potential for conflict or financial loss. Bugsy's hands-on approach, once a symbol of his visionary genius, now intensified both the pressures and the stakes of failure. The social environment at the Flamingo reflected Bugsy's dual worlds, the glitz of Hollywood and the shadow of organized crime. Celebrities mingled with high rollers, journalists, and mob figures in an intricate choreography that Bugsy orchestrated with remarkable skill. Every interaction was a balance of diplomacy, persuasion, and authority. Bugsy understood that reputation was as critical as revenue. A single misstep, a word spoken out of turn, or a minor scandal could reverberate far beyond the casino walls, affecting both public perception and syndicate confidence. In this environment, charm and control were as essential as strategic planning. Financially, the situation was delicate. The Flamingo's early revenues, though impressive in absolute terms, were insufficient to offset the enormous costs of construction, staffing, and entertainment. Bugsy's extravagances, luxury interiors, imported furnishings, lavish shows, had cemented the Flamingo's reputation for opulence, but they also fueled concern among syndicate leaders. Meetings with investors were fraught with tension, blending persuasion, intimidation, and the careful assertion of authority. Bugsy positioned the Flamingo not merely as a gambling enterprise but as a transformative venture that would redefine the cultural and economic landscape of Las Vegas. Yet the skepticism around him continued to grow. Amid these pressures, Bugsy's personal life also contributed to the tension. Relationships, both romantic and professional, were intensified by the high-stakes environment of the Flamingo. Women were drawn to his charisma and aura of danger, associates were drawn to his vision and audacity. However, this magnetic personality created friction, jealousy, and rivalries that could quickly escalate into conflict. Bugsy navigated these dynamics with his characteristic blend of charm and intimidation, but the complexity of his relationships added to the volatility of an already high-pressure environment. Operational challenges were constant. The desert location of the Flamingo presented logistical obstacles, supplies had to be transported across vast distances, staffing required careful coordination, and mechanical systems needed constant maintenance. Bugsy's insistence on perfection meant that even minor errors could become sources of conflict or inefficiency. He personally supervised casino operations, inspected rooms, and ensured that the entertainment met the high expectations he had established. Every detail, from table arrangements to lighting, was a reflection of his meticulous nature and uncompromising vision. The tension between vision and reality became increasingly pronounced. Bugsy's audacious ideas, while central to the Flamingo's identity, were also costly and risky. Syndicate scrutiny intensified as leaders weighed the potential for profit against the possibility of failure. The line between innovation and recklessness was perilously thin, and Bugsy's impulsive tendencies sometimes exacerbated concerns. Yet, it was precisely these qualities, his willingness to take risks, challenge norms, and envision what others could not, that had brought the Flamingo to life in the first place. Bugsy's genius lay in his understanding of human behavior. The design of the Flamingo, the arrangement of games, the flow of entertainment, and the ambience of the resort were all orchestrated to engage, captivate, and influence patrons. He created an immersive environment where gambling was not merely a transaction, but an experience. Yet, this brilliance carried immense personal and financial risk. The success of the Flamingo was inseparable from Bugsy himself, and every operational challenge reflected back on his reputation, judgment, and very survival. The pressures of this period were compounded by the syndicate's impatience. While some members admired Bugsy's vision and flair, others viewed his extravagance and volatility with concern. Letters, meetings, and phone calls became more frequent, more pointed, and occasionally more threatening. Bugsy's responses blended charm, persuasion, and assertiveness, attempting to reassure investors and maintain his authority. Yet behind the polished exterior, the stakes could not have been higher. Failure was not merely financial, it was existential, carrying potential consequences that extended far beyond the Flamingo's neon-lit floors. Despite the tension, the Flamingo continued to attract attention and acclaim. Guests were drawn to the combination of luxury, spectacle, and subtle danger. Bugsy's understanding of ambience, psychology, and social dynamics ensured that visitors remained engaged, spending both time and money. The resort's success, however, remained fragile, dependent on continuous oversight, strategic maneuvering, and the delicate management of expectations both inside and outside the syndicate. During this period, Bugsy's personal intensity was amplified by the stakes he faced. The Flamingo had become more than a business, it was a manifestation of his vision, ambition, and identity. Every operational decision, every social interaction, and every financial negotiation was colored by the knowledge that both the resort and his life depended on his skill, judgment, and audacity. Bugsy's brilliance and volatility were inseparable, each fueling the other in a delicate and dangerous dance. The months of scrutiny, pressure, and operational demand were a crucible for Bugsy Siegel. The Flamingo's neon glow masked the relentless tension behind the scenes, where ambition, genius, and risk converged. Every success was shadowed by the threat of failure, and every triumph carried the weight of potential catastrophe. Bugsy's ability to navigate this environment, balancing charm, authority, operational mastery, and financial acumen, would ultimately determine not only the fate of the Flamingo but the trajectory of his own life. In this critical chapter, the story of Bugsy Siegel is one of brilliance and fragility. The Flamingo, as dazzling as it appeared to the world, existed on the edge of financial collapse, syndicate scrutiny, and personal volatility. Bugsy's vision had transformed Las Vegas, yet the pressures of maintaining that vision were immense. The interplay of ambition, risk, and human complexity defined this period, setting the stage for the dramatic and tragic events that would follow, and marking the Flamingo, and its creator, as central figures in the history of American gambling and organized crime. The months that followed the initial opening of the Flamingo were a period of immense pressure and mounting tension for Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. While the resort dazzled guests with its neon brilliance, luxurious rooms, and elegant entertainment, the financial and personal stakes behind the scenes were escalating at an alarming rate. The costs of construction had far exceeded initial projections, leaving enormous debts that the syndicate monitored closely. Bugsy's insistence on perfection, from imported Italian furniture to the smallest decorative detail, had created a spectacle unlike any in the Nevada desert, but it also meant that the project teetered on the edge of financial collapse. Every day became a delicate balancing act, as Bugsy navigated the dual pressures of operational management and the scrutiny of investors who had little tolerance for failure. The operation of the Flamingo required a level of attention and energy that few men could sustain. Bugsy's presence was omnipresent. He oversaw the casino floor, inspected every room, mediated staff disputes, and ensured that entertainment maintained the highest standards of quality. He understood that each detail, no matter how minor, contributed to the overall experience, and therefore to the financial and cultural success of the resort. The placement of tables, the lighting, even the scent that lingered in the lobby were orchestrated to influence human behavior, encourage gambling, and immerse visitors in the luxurious atmosphere he had painstakingly created. Bugsy's genius lay in crafting not just a casino, but an experience, a theatrical environment that entranced and captivated. Yet, the pressures of oversight and financial scrutiny weighed heavily. Syndicate leaders, who had initially supported Bugsy's audacious vision, now questioned the escalating costs and persistent operational challenges. Meetings grew tense, with demands for updates, explanations, and assurances that the Flamingo would soon generate profit. Bugsy relied on a combination of charm, persuasion, and subtle intimidation to navigate these interactions, projecting confidence even as the weight of debt and expectation pressed down upon him. Every explanation, every argument, had to balance the need to maintain syndicate confidence with his own insistence on creative control and perfection. In addition to financial stress, Bugsy faced complex social dynamics. The Flamingo had become a hub where Hollywood celebrities, wealthy gamblers, journalists, and mob figures mingled in a delicate dance of influence, ambition, and subtle rivalry. Bugsy's personal charisma allowed him to mediate tensions, inspire loyalty, and assert authority, yet the overlapping worlds of glamour and crime were fraught with volatility. Envy, jealousy, and competition were constant, and Bugsy had to navigate them with as much skill as he applied to the management of the resort itself. His personal and professional lives were inextricably intertwined, and the stakes for missteps were high. Operational challenges persisted relentlessly. The harsh desert environment required careful management of logistics, supply chains, and staffing. Mechanical failures, desert heat, and human error threatened to undermine the resort's smooth functioning. Bugsy's hands-on approach, while brilliant, meant that he was personally accountable for any lapse. He inspected every room, monitored every staff member, and adjusted the casino's operations on the fly, maintaining a level of control that few others could manage. His attention to detail reinforced the perception of the Flamingo as a flawless oasis, yet the reality behind the scenes was far more complex and precarious. Amid this tension, the Flamingo continued to attract attention and acclaim. Patrons were captivated by the combination of luxury, spectacle, and thrill, and word spread quickly about the neon-lit oasis in the desert. Bugsy's understanding of human psychology ensured that guests were not merely entertained, they were immersed in an environment designed to stimulate excitement, indulgence, and loyalty. The Flamingo's allure was inseparable from Bugsy's personal vision, his ability to create a world where danger and glamour coexisted in intoxicating balance. Financial pressures, however, could not be ignored. Despite increasing revenue, the debt from construction and lavish expenditures remained enormous. Syndicate scrutiny intensified, and patience grew thin. Bugsy's personal temperament, his impulsive decisions, occasional tempers, and insistence on autonomy, added further strain to relationships with backers. Every operational misstep, every overspent dollar, and every delayed payment became a source of tension and doubt. Bugsy had created something extraordinary, but sustaining it required constant negotiation, persuasion, and calculated risk. Personal relationships added another layer of complexity. Bugsy's charm attracted romantic and professional attention, yet these relationships were often complicated by jealousy, rivalry, and the high-pressure environment of the Flamingo. Allies and associates were drawn to his vision and audacity, but this magnetism also invited scrutiny and resentment. Bugsy's ability to navigate these interpersonal dynamics was as critical to the Flamingo's survival as his operational genius. Every interaction had potential consequences that could ripple through the casino, the syndicate, and his own personal life. As the months wore on, Bugsy's position became increasingly precarious. The Flamingo's early brilliance masked underlying tensions, financial instability, operational pressures, and the ever-present scrutiny of the syndicate. Bugsy's genius, audacity, and meticulous attention to detail had brought the resort to life, yet the very qualities that ensured its success also amplified risk. His life and legacy were bound to the Flamingo's fate, and the margin for error was razor-thin. In the midst of this volatility, Bugsy's vision continued to drive the Flamingo forward. He refined operations, nurtured the resort's image, and maintained an aura of glamour that captivated patrons and media alike. Yet each day was a test, a delicate balance between brilliance and recklessness, ambition and survival. The Flamingo was more than a building, it was a reflection of Bugsy himself, a monument to audacity and creativity built on a foundation of risk, tension, and relentless pressure. The months following the opening underscored a harsh reality: in Bugsy Siegel's world, success was inseparable from danger. The Flamingo's brilliance could not erase the debts, scrutiny, and personal vulnerabilities that shadowed it. Every triumph carried the weight of expectation, every misstep threatened both the resort and the man who had brought it into being. In this crucible of pressure and ambition, Bugsy's ingenuity, audacity, and volatility converged, setting the stage for the dramatic and tragic events that would ultimately define his life and the legacy of the Flamingo. The Flamingo, as it shimmered in the desert night, stood as a testament to both human ambition and human fragility. Bugsy Siegel had achieved something extraordinary. He had transformed a barren stretch of Nevada into a symbol of luxury, thrill, and audacity. Yet this achievement came at a steep cost, in both financial terms and personal risk. The months following its opening would be remembered as a time of brilliance shadowed by tension, a period in which Bugsy's genius and volatility were tested to the extreme, and the fate of the man and his empire hung in the balance. The period following the opening of the Flamingo marked the height of tension and volatility in Benjamin Bugsy Siegel's life. While the resort had become an icon of luxury, glamour, and high-stakes excitement, the financial reality behind its glittering facade was far more precarious. Construction costs had ballooned far beyond original projections, leaving enormous debts that the syndicate monitored closely. Bugsy's uncompromising insistence on perfection, from imported furnishings to lavish entertainment, had created a spectacle unlike any other, but it had also stretched both patience and resources to the limit. Every day, he balanced the dual pressures of operational oversight and the scrutiny of powerful backers whose tolerance for mismanagement was rapidly diminishing. Bugsy's personal involvement in every aspect of the Flamingo's operation was both a testament to his genius and a source of tremendous stress. He supervised the casino floor, inspected rooms, mediated disputes among staff, and ensured that all entertainment met his exacting standards. Even the smallest details, the positioning of tables, the flow of lighting, the scent lingering in public spaces, were carefully orchestrated to influence patrons' moods and encourage gambling. Bugsy understood that the Flamingo was more than a casino, it was a theatrical experience, an immersive environment designed to enthrall guests and generate both excitement and profit. The social environment at the Flamingo added further complexity. Hollywood stars, high rollers, journalists, and mob associates mingled in a delicate, high-stakes dance of power and influence. Bugsy's charisma allowed him to manage these interactions with apparent ease, but beneath the surface lay jealousy, rivalry, and occasional hostility. Maintaining control required constant attention, negotiation, and, when necessary, intimidation. Bugsy's presence was a stabilizing force, yet his personality, marked by intensity, audacity, and occasional volatility, meant that the line between charm and threat was often thin. Financial scrutiny from the syndicate intensified with each passing month. While some backers admired Bugsy's bold vision and ability to generate cultural impact, others viewed his expenditures as reckless and unsustainable. Meetings became increasingly tense, with demands for accountability, explanations of cost overruns, and assurances of eventual profitability. Bugsy's responses blended charm, persuasion, and subtle assertion of authority. He framed the Flamingo not simply as a business venture, but as a transformative enterprise, one that would redefine Las Vegas and elevate gambling into an experience of glamour, thrill, and sophistication. Yet for all his assurances, the uncertainty and risk remained palpable. Operational challenges were relentless. The desert environment presented unique logistical problems. Supplies had to be transported across long distances, equipment required constant maintenance, and staffing needed careful management. Bugsy's hands-on approach ensured that nothing was left to chance, but it also meant that he carried the full weight of responsibility for the resort's daily performance. Every mechanical failure, scheduling conflict, or minor error had the potential to escalate into a significant problem, affecting both revenue and reputation. Bugsy's meticulous attention to detail was essential, yet it amplified the intensity of the pressures he faced. At the same time, the Flamingo's reputation continued to grow. Patrons were captivated by the luxurious environment, the excitement of the casino floor, and the allure of participating in a high-profile, glamorous destination. Bugsy's genius in orchestrating atmosphere, entertainment, and human behavior ensured that guests were not merely visitors, but participants in a carefully constructed experience. The resort's success depended on more than its facilities. It relied on Bugsy's vision, presence, and ability to manage complex social and operational dynamics. Personal relationships further complicated Bugsy's life during this period. Romantic entanglements, professional alliances, and syndicate loyalties were all intertwined with the pressures of managing the Flamingo. Bugsy's intensity and charisma drew people to him, but also created tension and jealousy. He had to navigate a delicate balance of trust, influence, and control to maintain loyalty and mitigate conflict. Every interaction had the potential to affect not only his reputation but the stability and performance of the Flamingo itself. As months passed, the financial strain became more acute. Early revenue, while promising, was insufficient to cover the extraordinary costs of construction and operation. Syndicate scrutiny was unrelenting, and patience was running thin. Bugsy's flair for negotiation and persuasion was put to the ultimate test, as he sought to reassure backers and maintain control of the Flamingo while simultaneously driving the resort toward operational excellence. His life and reputation were inseparable from the resort's fate, and every decision carried enormous consequences. Amidst this pressure, Bugsy's ingenuity and understanding of human psychology remained central to the Flamingo's allure. He orchestrated the flow of the casino, the placement of tables and lighting, and the behavior of staff to ensure that every guest was engaged, entertained, and subtly encouraged to spend. The resort was more than a gambling venue, it was a living, breathing performance, where every detail reflected Bugsy's meticulous design and strategic insight. Yet the constant demands of maintaining this perfection created both personal stress and exposure to risk, as failure could come from unexpected quarters at any moment. The juxtaposition of brilliance and danger defined this period. Bugsy's vision had created a resort that was revolutionary in design, atmosphere, and impact, but the very factors that made it extraordinary also made it vulnerable. Debt, operational complexity, and syndicate scrutiny combined with Bugsy's impulsive tendencies to create a volatile environment in which the margin for error was razor-thin. Every triumph was shadowed by the awareness that a single misstep could unravel months of work, damage relationships, and jeopardize his life. Even as these pressures mounted, the Flamingo's social and cultural impact continued to expand. Celebrities, journalists, and gamblers flocked to the resort, drawn by the allure of luxury and the thrill of participating in an environment carefully curated to captivate. Bugsy's name became synonymous with glamour and audacity, reinforcing the Flamingo's reputation and his own status as a visionary gangster-turned-entrepreneur. Yet with increasing fame came increasing scrutiny, and the stakes for both personal and professional miscalculation grew ever higher. The months following the Flamingo's opening were therefore a crucible in which Bugsy Siegel's genius, volatility, and audacity were tested to their limits. The resort had become a landmark of luxury, thrill, and spectacle, yet the pressures surrounding its operation, financial, operational, and social, threatened to overwhelm him. Every decision, every interaction, and every operational adjustment reflected both the brilliance of his vision and the fragility of its execution. The Flamingo was more than a casino, it was a reflection of Bugsy himself, a monument to ambition, audacity, and the precarious nature of human endeavor. In these intense months, Bugsy's life was defined by the intersection of risk, vision, and human complexity. The flamingo's brilliance could not erase the enormous debts, scrutiny, and personal vulnerabilities that shadowed it. Every triumph carried weight, every misstep potential disaster. In the crucible of these pressures, Bugsy Siegel's genius and flaws converged, setting the stage for the dramatic and ultimately tragic events that would define both his life and the legacy of the flamingo, a creation that had transformed the landscape of Las Vegas forever. The months following the opening of the Flamingo represented the most intense and turbulent period of Benjamin Bugsy Siegel's life, a time when his visionary ambitions collided with the harsh realities of finance, human nature, and organized crime. The resort, now in operation, continued to attract celebrities, high rollers, journalists, and influential figures from Hollywood and beyond, cementing its reputation as the crown jewel of Las Vegas. Its neon lights glittered against the desert night, a symbol of audacious ambition, glamour, and excitement. Yet behind the facade, the pressures pressing on Bugsy were relentless, a complex web of financial obligations, operational demands, and syndicate scrutiny that threatened to unravel both the flamingo and the man who had brought it to life. Financial stress dominated every day. The enormous debts incurred during construction were far from repaid, and while the resort drew visitors in impressive numbers, early revenue streams were insufficient to cover the extravagant costs of development and operation. Syndicate leaders, who had financed Bugsy's ambitious vision with cautious optimism, now questioned every expense, every delay, and every extravagant detail. Meetings grew tense and fraught with scrutiny, their focus turning sharply to accountability and the return on their enormous investment. Bugsy's persuasive charm, once enough to allay doubts, now had to contend with increasing impatience and suspicion among his backers. Bugsy's personal involvement in every operational detail intensified during this period. He inspected rooms, oversaw the casino floor, mediated staff disputes, and personally supervised entertainment, ensuring that the Flamingo met his uncompromising standards. He understood that the resort's allure relied on precision, the careful choreography of light, space, and ambience, combined with the subtleties of human behavior. From the arrangement of tables to the placement of lights and the flow of guests through the casino, Bugsy meticulously crafted an environment designed to mesmerize and engage, keeping visitors immersed in an experience that blended luxury, excitement, and subtle tension. The social dynamics within and surrounding the Flamingo were equally complex. Hollywood stars, journalists, gamblers, and mob figures mingled in a precarious balance of admiration, competition, and subtle rivalry. Bugsy navigated this world with both charm and authority, leveraging his charisma to maintain control and command loyalty. Yet beneath the surface, envy and resentment simmered, and any misstep could spark conflict with lasting consequences. Bugsy's personal and professional reputation was inseparable from the resort's performance. Every decision and interaction carried stakes that extended beyond the walls of the casino into the wider world of organized crime and high society. Operationally, the challenges were relentless. The desert setting posed logistical difficulties, supplies needed careful coordination. Mechanical systems required constant maintenance, and staffing issues demanded constant oversight. Bugsy's hands-on approach ensured that the resort functioned smoothly, but it also placed the weight of responsibility squarely on his shoulders. Any operational failure, even minor, could ripple outward, threatening revenue, reputation, and investor confidence. Bugsy's meticulous attention to detail became both a necessity and a source of constant stress, as maintaining perfection in such a complex environment was a daily struggle. Amid these pressures, Bugsy's personal relationships added further complications. Romantic entanglements, professional alliances, and loyalty to syndicate backers created a delicate network of expectations and obligations. His charm drew people into his orbit, but it also created jealousy, mistrust, and conflict. Navigating these dynamics required a careful balance of influence, intimidation, and persuasion. Bugsy's ability to manage these relationships was as crucial to the Flamingo's success as his operational skill, highlighting the intricate interplay between personality, social dynamics, and business strategy. Despite these mounting pressures, the Flamingo continued to attract attention and admiration. Guests were captivated by the luxurious accommodations, the excitement of the casino, and the carefully curated spectacle that Bugsy orchestrated. The resort's success, however, remained fragile. Every day, Bugsy had to manage financial concerns, operational challenges, and the expectations of both his staff and syndicate backers. The delicate balance between brilliance and risk defined each moment, as the Flamingo's reputation and the safety of its visionary creator depended on his skillful navigation of an unforgiving environment. The financial scrutiny Bugsy faced intensified with each passing month. Syndicate members questioned whether the extravagant spending and persistent operational challenges could ultimately yield a profitable return. While some admired Bugsy's audacity and visionary creativity, others were increasingly concerned about the risks he posed to their investment. The combination of relentless financial oversight and his own impulsive tendencies created an environment of constant tension, where every decision was scrutinized, and every failure had potentially severe consequences. Bugsy's charm and persuasive abilities were tested to their limits as he sought to reassure investors, maintain operational control, and protect his personal reputation. The Flamingo's social and cultural significance continued to grow, even as financial pressures mounted. Celebrities, journalists, and high-profile gamblers were drawn to the resort's glamour and excitement, adding to its mystique and reinforcing Bugsy's status as a visionary. Yet the very visibility that ensured its success also increased the stakes of scrutiny, jealousy, and rivalry. Bugsy's personal involvement in maintaining both the resort's operational excellence and its image demanded extraordinary focus, resilience, and strategic thinking. Operational complexity and personal risk were inseparable during this period. Bugsy's genius lay in his ability to craft an environment that captivated guests while navigating the intricate web of social, financial, and criminal pressures. Every table, light, and staff interaction was calculated to maintain engagement, maximize revenue, and project an aura of sophistication and thrill. Yet, the magnitude of responsibility and the intensity of scrutiny created a pressure cooker situation, where any misstep could imperil both the Flamingo and Bugsy's own life. As the months progressed, it became increasingly clear that the Flamingo's success was tied directly to Bugsy's personal ingenuity and ability to manage risk under extreme pressure. His visionary creativity had brought the resort to life, but maintaining it required unrelenting attention, diplomatic skill, and relentless energy. The Flamingo had transformed Las Vegas, capturing public imagination and establishing a new standard for luxury and spectacle. Yet the very qualities that made it extraordinary, audacity, perfectionism, and high stakes, also made its survival precarious. Bugsy's life during this period was defined by a constant oscillation between brilliance and danger, ambition and vulnerability. The Flamingo was more than a business, it was a manifestation of his identity, a living testament to his vision, and a high-stakes gamble with consequences that extended far beyond the Nevada desert. The pressures of managing operational complexity, financial scrutiny, social dynamics, and personal relationships converged in a relentless cycle, testing Bugsy's genius, resilience, and audacity to their limits. In the crucible of these months, Bugsy Siegel's brilliance and volatility were inseparable. The Flamingo's success, while dazzling and culturally transformative, depended on his ability to navigate a precarious environment of debt, expectation, and human complexity. Each triumph carried with it the potential for disaster, and each operational decision had consequences that could ripple far beyond the resort's neon-lit floors. This period, marked by tension, creativity, and risk, set the stage for the dramatic and tragic events that would define both Bugsy's legacy and the enduring story of the Flamingo. The Flamingo, a shimmering jewel in the Nevada desert, stood as both a monument to human ambition and a reflection of human fragility. Bugsy's vision had transformed a barren landscape into a playground of luxury, thrill, and spectacle. Yet this achievement came with extraordinary risk. The months following its opening were a crucible, testing Bugsy's genius, judgment, and resilience, and setting the stage for the events that would ultimately determine the fate of both the man and the empire he had created. The period following the Flamingo's construction saw Benjamin Bugsy Siegel navigating a world of high stakes, ambition, and constant scrutiny. The resort had begun to attract attention from Hollywood celebrities, wealthy gamblers, journalists, and organized crime figures, establishing Las Vegas as a destination of glamour and thrill. Yet behind the dazzling lights, financial strain and operational challenges created a delicate and tense environment that required Bugsy's constant attention. Construction costs had far exceeded expectations, and extravagant spending on furnishings, entertainment, and luxury amenities left the project deeply in debt. Syndicate backers, who had initially supported his bold vision, now demanded accountability and tangible returns. Bugsy relied on his charm, persuasive skill, and charisma to maintain their confidence, yet the pressure of justifying expenses while keeping the Flamingo operational weighed heavily on him. Operationally, Bugsy remained hands-on, supervising every detail, from the placement of gaming tables and the flow of guests to entertainment scheduling and staff management. Every element was designed to guide human behavior, maximizing engagement, excitement, and indulgence. The Flamingo was not merely a casino but an immersive experience, a carefully orchestrated environment reflecting Bugsy's understanding of psychology and human desire. Social dynamics added further complexity. Hollywood stars, journalists, high rollers, and mob associates navigated a web of influence, rivalry, and observation. Bugsy's personal relationships were intertwined with professional obligations, requiring him to maintain loyalty, manage perception, and assert authority constantly. Envy and suspicion were ever present, amplifying the stakes of each decision. Despite the mounting pressures, the Flamingo's reputation grew. Guests were captivated by its luxury, thrill, and spectacle, and Bugsy's genius in orchestrating every detail solidified his status as a visionary. Yet the project's brilliance was inseparable from its fragility. Debt, scrutiny, and operational complexity made every triumph shadowed by potential disaster, and Bugsy's ability to balance ambition and risk became ever more crucial. The months following the opening of the Flamingo marked a period of extraordinary pressure and relentless activity for Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. The resort had already captured the attention of celebrities, high-rolling gamblers, journalists, and influential figures from both Hollywood and organized crime, its neon lights blazing like a beacon across the desert night. Bugsy's creation was no longer merely a casino, it was an immersive experience, a meticulously crafted world designed to captivate, thrill, and entice every guest. Yet behind the spectacle, financial strain, operational challenges, and intense syndicate scrutiny created an environment that was both exhilarating and precarious. Financial concerns dominated Bugsy's life. Construction costs and lavish spending had far exceeded initial estimates, creating enormous debt that demanded constant attention. Syndicate leaders, who had initially tolerated his audacity, now closely monitored every expense and delay, their patience growing thin. Bugsy relied on charm and persuasion to maintain their confidence, yet the pressure of justifying extravagant costs while ensuring profitability was a constant burden. Operationally, Bugsy remained hands-on, personally supervising every detail of the Flamingo. From the layout of the casino floor to the flow of guests, lighting, and entertainment scheduling, he orchestrated every element to maximize engagement and maintain the illusion of seamless luxury. His understanding of human behavior allowed him to craft an environment that encouraged indulgence while keeping visitors captivated, making the Flamingo not just a resort but a psychological experience. The social dynamics at the Flamingo added further complexity. Hollywood stars, journalists, wealthy gamblers, and mob associates mingled in a delicate balance of admiration, rivalry, and subtle competition. Bugsy navigated these interactions with charm and authority, yet envy and suspicion were ever present. Relationships, both personal and professional, required careful management, as any misstep could affect his reputation, operational control, or standing with syndicate backers. Despite these pressures, the Flamingo's allure continued to grow. Guests were drawn to its luxury, spectacle, and carefully curated thrill. Yet the very qualities that made it extraordinary, ambition, attention to detail, and audacity, also rendered it fragile. Financial instability, operational complexity, and human tension created a high-stakes environment where every decision could have far-reaching consequences. Bugsy's brilliance and volatility were inseparable, each fueling the other as he struggled to maintain control over both his creation and his life. In these months, the flamingo symbolized both the genius and vulnerability of Bugsy Siegel. Its brilliance illuminated Las Vegas and captured the imagination of the nation, yet it existed in a delicate balance of risk, debt, and human complexity. Bugsy's personal and professional worlds were inseparably entwined, each shaping the other, setting the stage for the dramatic events that would ultimately define his legacy. The months following the opening of the Flamingo were both the pinnacle and the most precarious period of Benjamin Bugsy Siegel's life. The resort had become the centerpiece of Las Vegas, attracting Hollywood stars, high-rolling gamblers, journalists, and influential figures from organized crime. Its neon lights pierced the desert night, a dazzling testament to Bugsy's audacity and vision. Yet behind the glamour, financial strain, operational pressures, and syndicate scrutiny created a tense and fragile environment. Debt and financial oversight dominated Bugsy's daily existence. Construction costs and lavish spending had far exceeded initial estimates, and while revenue from the resort grew, it was insufficient to fully offset expenses. Syndicate backers, initially supportive of his visionary ambition, now demanded accountability and results. Bugsy relied on his charm, strategic acumen, and persuasive skill to maintain their confidence, yet the stakes were higher than ever. Operationally, Bugsy remained deeply involved in every detail. From the casino floor layout to guest flow, lighting, and entertainment schedules, he orchestrated every element to enhance the guest experience and encourage engagement. His understanding of human behavior allowed him to create an immersive environment that subtly guided patrons' actions, maximizing both excitement and profit. Social dynamics added another layer of complexity. Hollywood celebrities, gamblers, journalists, and mob associates navigated overlapping circles of influence, rivalry, and observation. Bugsy managed these relationships with charisma and authority, yet envy and suspicion were constant. Any misstep could have consequences for the Flamingo's operations or his standing with the syndicate. Despite pressures, the Flamingo's reputation flourished, cementing Bugsy's status as a visionary. Yet its brilliance was inseparable from fragility. Debt, operational complexity, and human tension created an environment where any error could prove disastrous. Bugsy's genius and volatility were intertwined, each amplifying the stakes. His life, reputation, and the Flamingo's success depended on his ability to navigate this high-pressure world, setting the stage for the final, fateful events of his story. The final chapter of Benjamin Bugsy Siegel's life and the story of the Flamingo is a delicate balance of ambition, brilliance, and tragedy. By this point, the resort had established Las Vegas as a city of glamour and excitement. Its neon lights stretched across the desert, drawing Hollywood stars, wealthy gamblers, journalists, and visitors from across the country. The Flamingo was more than a casino, it was Bugsy's vision made tangible, a meticulously crafted world designed to captivate and thrill. Yet beneath the dazzling surface, financial strain, operational challenges, and the scrutiny of syndicate backers created a fragile and high-pressure environment. Debt had reached a critical peak. Construction costs and lavish operational spending far exceeded initial estimates, and while revenue was growing, profits were insufficient to satisfy investors. Meetings with backers were tense, demanding accountability and immediate results. Bugsy relied on charm and persuasive skill to maintain confidence, but the margin for error had disappeared. Every decision carried consequences, and the risk of failure was ever present. Bugsy remained hands-on in every aspect of the Flamingo's operation, from casino layout and staffing to entertainment and guest experience. He understood human behavior and designed every detail to guide, entice, and immerse visitors. Social dynamics added pressure, as Hollywood stars, journalists, gamblers, and mob associates mingled, creating envy, rivalry, and tension. Despite the strain, the Flamingo flourished, cementing Bugsy's reputation as a visionary. Yet its brilliance was inseparable from its fragility. Debt, scrutiny, and human tension made every triumph shadowed by risk. Bugsy's life, reputation, and the Flamingo's success were intertwined, dependent on his ability to navigate this high-stakes world. Bugsy Siegel's death marked the tragic culmination of ambition and audacity. The Flamingo survived as a testament to his vision, transforming Las Vegas forever. His legacy endures as both a tribute to creativity and a sobering reminder of the dangers that accompany extraordinary ambition.